Chapter 21, Adrenaline. I was camouflaged as I looked up to the peak of the huge orange monolith that was Soliel's castle. I was planning on diving into this dungeon multiple times today, knowing that this orange hue will quickly change to blue and cause some unwanted attention to shift over here. But I wasn't worried too much currently. My strength could be considered great, and I didn't see another case like Anderson crazily appearing to bring me any issues. I stopped thinking so much and looked forward to seeing how long I would clear this dungeon that took an elite hunter squad of this city more than half a day to go through. A dungeon with one floor holding a huge castle that had 20 extremely large rooms and one boss hall. I was looking forward to it. I placed my hand on one of the squares of the monolith with bubbling enthusiasm as I was transferred to the planes that showed a castle on the horizon. All the active skills were activated, making my body shine with an inordinate amount of colors. I also activated Whirlwind as gales of wind also began appearing around me, making me disappear from the spot I was standing just as I put some force on my feet. Aha! I was propelled upwards for more than 10 meters as my figure breezed towards the castle. I couldn't help but let a laugh escape my lips as I fell towards the ground and rebounded only to be thrown forward even faster. I had to adapt to this crazy level of strength and speed that the skills and my increased attributes were giving me as I moved forward. I couldn't control my descent from my last jump and managed to smash into the huge door of the castle, disrupting its serene peace and waking up the first 10 statues in the first room. I dashed towards them as if I was possessed and finally cast Smite. 10 golden swords of light appeared above me even faster than when I cast it the first time, hanging imposingly as they waited for my command. Strike down. I couldn't help myself as I said these words out loud and the 2-meter-long golden sword barreled down towards the oncoming statues. Boom. A blinding light exploded out as the golden sword struck down the incoming statues, causing dust and rubble to fly about as I breathed heavily and watched the scene clear. Only stones were left shattered on the ground. Aha! Aha! I couldn't help but laugh at the ridiculousness of it. In less than a second, all the rank C monsters were dead. I was even more confident while thinking about all the skills that enhanced my damage, cast and attack speed, as well as increased penetration that let me further ignore the defenses of monsters. I felt the rush and adrenaline coursing through me as the room was completed in under a minute and pushed off from where I stood to head towards the large door to the next room. I blasted in and saw the now 11 statues move about as another 10 golden blades appeared above me. They targeted the nearest 10 as I moved at high speeds and quickly appeared in front of the 11th. Moving my hand around speedily as I plastered multiple explosive runes on its body and commanded them to explode right in front of me. I loved watching the huge explosions occur when I was near and observed the huge impact blasting out the statue's body. The entire force was negated by the now 100 proficiency skill Arcanist Sphere of Protection that wasn't really a sphere anymore and hugged my body as if it was another layer of skin. The room was once again cleared in a few seconds. My breathing increased and I rushed into the third room. 10 statues were quickly obliterated by another cast of Smite and I moved close to the remaining 2 statues and cast Flames of Torment. The long pillar of flames had a darker color after reaching 100, its flames coagulated together, tightly as if they were a thick viscous material. It was rotating the moment I cast it in its long linear form, causing hot suffocating winds to fly out. I threw the thick cable of flames forward and they literally melted the statues the moment they came in contact. I stopped for a second to catch my breath as I just cleared 3 rooms out the 20 in under 5 minutes. A childish smile wouldn't leave my face as I continued on forward to the 4th. The next rooms were cleared in a similar fashion, starting out with Smite and following with either Explosive Rune or Flames of Torment starting from the 10th room. I just cast another Smite the moment the first 10 statues were shattered by the first cast, finishing them in record time. I was now standing in front of the huge door that led to the boss room and I tried collecting myself as I impatiently went in. The Titan was as humongous as usual, frighteningly boasting its 10-meter size. The 10 guards standing by its side couldn't even respond as 10 golden swords smashed into them the moment I entered. The huge beast opened its blank eyes the moment the guards were destroyed and began coming towards me, its huge steps causing the ground tremble. I watched the boss menacingly come towards me as 10 swords of light appear, then another 10, and another 10 as Smite was repeatedly cast 3 times. I commanded the first 10 to shoot towards the boss in a tight-knit circular formation. They smashed onto his chest, stopping his advance and pushing him back. The next 10 flew up one after another to repeatedly strike the same area. I was focusing on the Titan's head, blasting onto him and pushing him back even further. The last 10 flew in and surrounded the neck around a few meters away and rushed forward while it was still disoriented. Before it could even roar or do anything else, the 10 golden swords closed in on its neck from all directions. Zing! The titan wobbled for a few seconds before a pillar of thick flames wrapped around the nearly destroyed neck and squeezed in, melting everything it came in contact with. Another second passed before a loud crash was heard in the huge hall. The titan's head now lay on the ground. Not even a minute had passed. I watched this unbelievable scene in front of me as if it wasn't something that I had just done. The huge boss that needed an entire party to hunt had taken me less than a minute to take down. Ah! I let out an embarrassingly loud triumphant howl after accepting the scene in front of me and reveled in it once more. Around 20 minutes total had passed and the castle was completely cleared. A green crystal rose as a shining pile of loot appeared beside the boss. From then on, I kept on repeating Soliel's castle like a madman. 8 hours later, I had impossibly cleared the dungeon more than 24 times, my clearing averaging 3 times in 1 hour. At the end, I held in my storage rings a ton of rank C core S, 15 rank C skills, 1 rank B skill, and 5 new item S. Chapter 22, Explosive Growth. I was in love with this rank C dungeon. Only a single floor that held all the monsters in one place. Someone in my positions couldn't have asked for a better setting to quickly take everything down in record time and rake in an unimaginable amount of profit. I never thought a day would come where I would be able to collect this many rank C skills, and even lucky enough have a rank B skill drop along with a few items. Hunters had been clearing Soliel's dungeon twice a week, so over the span of the last few months they might have cleared it around the same time as I cleared it in one day. Just the thought of it made me amazed. My 2 storage rings had nearly filled up to the brim with the influx of core S, skill S, and item S. I was currently in the boss room of the dungeon where a broken titan lay dead while browsing through the rank C items first. There were 2 pairs of igneous armor S, 1 igneous sword, fiery helm, and fiery boots. All of them exactly the same as the equipment that Anderson wore, but I wouldn't have to wait before equipping these ones. The ones I had obtained from him were still repairing from the heavy explosions done by explosive rune. I changed from swift boots to fiery boots and equipped one of the armors and helm. The armor had a similar characteristic of being unnaturally flexible even though it seemed like it was made up of extremely strong stone materials. The helm on my head also made me look like some sort of gladiator, so I took it off for now and only planned to equip it when I was faced with enemies. The item S vastly improved my defense and acted as another layer of resistance besides the many skills already active. Next up were the abundant amount of skills. Something I never thought I would be holding is such large quantities. These would cost millions if I were to sell them, but money wasn't the main thing I was after. I looked through the skills trying to find which ones were actually effective for me to learn and narrowed it down to 8. The rest were skills that either required bows or another specific weapon to activate, or they were offensive skills with similar power to the ones I was currently using. I would learn as many supportive and defensive skills, but I would choose my main attacking skills with close scrutiny as those are the only ones I have to actively cast and use. If I held too many offensive skills and switched from to another one using, I would just have many skills in a similar level of power and not a few skills with high proficiency that have even more power. The 8 that I absorbed and learned were Sharpen. Your attacks and skills deal more damage to your enemies. War Cry. Motivate yourself and your allies, increasing attributes by 5%. Retaliation. Reflect back some of the damage from your enemies. King's Rage. The rage of a king flows through you, granting a boost in damage. Military Tactics. The qualities of a fortified soldier are activated, increasing all attributes by 10. Unpredictable. Attack and casting speed increased by 10%. Elemental Damage. Any attacks using the elements deal destructive damage. And Stealth. Move undetected as all the energies you emit are absorbed. Learning and activating the skills gave me another sense of exhilaration. Military Tactics that increased each of my attributes by 10 added the specified amount to vitality and strength while focus remained as blank as usual. The rank B skill book that had been lucky enough to drop was Stealth, which was such a great skill that it trumped everything else I gained today because of its high utility. Any colors or imposing airs released by the activated skills were all reined in and I seemed like a normal human being without an ounce of strength. I could also choose to blend into my surroundings to a similar effect like camouflage. Adding these 2 skills together would just be a killer combination. I would keep Stealth active at all times and only activate camouflage or use the blending in effect of Stealth when I really needed to. I didn't grasp the full strength of a full-fledged rank B hunter that held multiple rank B skills and items, but I felt like my strength was at the peak of B if not higher. I would make no conclusions before meeting hunters that I can test against though. My next move was to absorb the multitude of cores filling up the 2 storage rings, there being more than enough to bring my attribute points to 200 after an hour of extensive absorbing. Feeling the packed strength of my body that had been increasing way too fast, I took a second to reminisce how it was barely just a week since I awakened. My body felt like it could explode with tremendous power anytime I wished, giving me even more confidence on the path I was walking on. I rose up and touched the green crystal to leave the dungeon, looking back and seeing the dungeon monolith now having a color of light blue. Soliel's castle was now a low-risk dungeon that had no chance of a dungeon break occurring anytime soon. Hunters that were stationed a distance away in shops and stalls quickly noticed the change a few hours ago and began discussing amongst themselves as to which peak hunter had come across their city. I didn't want to completely break their common sense with them seeing me enter the dungeon every 20 minutes, so I took off camouflage, while still keeping stealth active and hiding the assortment of colors and armors around me from the skill effects every 2 hours for them to see a figure be transported out of the dungeon and diving back in right after. I was already renowned and didn't need to hide, but that didn't mean I shouldn't hide this unexplainable level of strength I held for the time being. I did want to build a reputation for myself from now on for future plans, but I would only show them a surface of what I could do. In the case another crazy hunter appeared in front of me, I had the confidence to completely take care of them if they were only expecting the level of strength I was showing. This was the last time I was leaving the dungeon today, so I didn't use camouflage. There were reporters and cameramen at a far distance carefully documenting the changes and pointing their cameras towards me. I tried not to react to any of it and took a ride from a nervous driver that was driving carefully at the speed limit while constantly looking back at me. I chuckled at this as we went towards the pristine residency lodging. I would visit the Awakens Center tomorrow morning to see if there was anything of value, but seeing as I was the person clearing the highest ranked dungeon currently and holding on to all the loot, I doubted there would be anything fruitful. My next phase of plans was to relax. It was only in the evening, but I wanted to stop thinking for a bit, eat a whole lot of food and just sleep. I recalled the platters of shrimp and steaks that I had been eating the past few days and placed an order for 4 plates when I grabbed my room keys at Pristine Residency. Tonight would be a relaxing night. In Star City. A man was looking at the profile of a hunter they had just received more news of a few hours ago. He was Vice Admiral Magyar, a decorated officer that stood at the front lines when monsters were running rampant and killing people left and right. He had risen to this rank because of his continuing hard work and planning while fighting for his country. His country that he was trying to save once more. He just needed people to stop shoving their heads up their asses and listen. His work and stress had been piling up recently as he was recruiting talent to dive into the rank B dungeon, Mangrove Swamp. They needed more production of Core S, Skill S, and Item S more badly than most people thought. He thought back to the report that described the huge threat that was congregating in one location not far from the Empire and then focused once more on Hunter in front of him. Noah Osmont. Active for around a week and already making waves. These were the types of people he needed. He quickly made a phone call to the contacts stationed in Outer Bank X and gave a message for them to deliver. Noah Osmont. Occupation, Hunter. Vitality, 200 plus 40. Focus, minus. Strength, 200 plus 60. Skill S. F Fireball 100, F Heal 53, Arctic Armor minus 100, D Flames of Torment 100, D Safeguard 38, D Danger Sense 100, D Rough Skin 23, D Fleeting 24, C Arcanist Sphere of Protection 100, C Camouflage 83, C Aura of Haste 72, C Explosive Rune 81, C Life Essence 73, C Increased Penetration 58, C Regeneration 21, C Whirlwind 33, C Smite 28, C Gracefulness 21, C Precision 21, C Adamant 21, C Sharpen 4, C Warcry 4, C Retaliation 4, C King's Rage 4, C Military Tactics 4, C Unpredictable 4, C Elemental Damage 4, B Giants. Strength 27, B Stealth 3. Equipment 2x, C Ring of Storage, C Fiery Boots, C Igneous Armor, C Fiery Helm. Chapter 23, An Invitation. The night passed by spectacularly as I binged on food and familiarized myself with my fast-expanding array of skills. There were many and I was increasing them at a very fast rate that doesn't seem like it would reduce anytime soon. I went over every single one of the support skills to try and gain a better understanding of just how much they were increasing my damage output with my skills. I would get the chance to possibly observe this change more noticeably today after I use my offensive skills for the first time after adding 8 more new support skills in a day. I left the pristine residency while activating the full extent of stealth so that I could avoid any unwanted attention as I made my way towards the Awaken Center. I browsed over the skills once more and as expected, nothing of value was there. I held many rank C skills currently that would make a ton of money if sold, but I was planning on holding on to them for now until I began making my way over to some of the inner cities of the Empire where it was possible to buy rank B skills. The knowledge spread over on hunting platforms mentioned that their prices ranged upwards of 10 million because of their high demands and very little supply. They were my next goal, as I could only obtain a rank B skill book at a very low chance with the rank C dungeon I was currently clearing. Seeing nothing else catching my eye at the Awaken Center, I left for Soliel's castle right away. When I arrived at the huge monolith though, there was someone obviously out of place standing near it. It was a curvaceous woman in a tight business suit checking her watch as she waited for something. No hunters were cl.us.turd around Soliel's castle as normal rank C hunting squads didn't dare dive into the dungeon, so the only person she could be waiting for here was me. I removed my stealth and appeared a few feet away, startling her from my sudden appearance. A bright smile bloomed on her face as if she had found the huge treasure she was looking for. "Hello Mr. Osmont, my name is Amelia Ross and I'm here on behalf of Vice Admiral Magner of Star City." Her words started off very normal but the end was explosive. I was immediately intrigued as Star City was one of the core defense cities in the Empire, with the government spreading its clutches in almost all industries and activities. Also, I had never come across any high titles such as Vice Admiral before. I replied back with a smile, "What can I do for you?" She nodded with a relieved expression and continued, "I won't waste too much of your time, Sir Hunter, so I will give the message I was instructed to for you to read at your leisure." A thin folder with papers appeared on her hands and she handed it to me, finishing her last words as she left hurriedly. "Oh, Mr. Osmont, many of the files in there are confidential, so we are counting on your discretion." I nodded at these words and watched her get in a black sedan that quickly pulled away. "A confidential file, huh? What exactly do you contain?" The first paper was an introduction from the one known as Vice Admiral Magner, and he kept things very much on point. He was hiring rank B hunters or hire to work with the government to raid the rank B dungeon, Mangrove Swamp. Half the loot would go towards the government as they provided you with money, or anything else you wished for that they could provide. If you were patriotic enough and enlisted in the Empire's army, you would be in the first row of hunters who can select skills and items useful to them in their vast armory while also receiving the full benefits of the military. There were very few papers in the file, and the last one was the even more eye-catching one, with the entire paper only holding 2 sentences that made me very concerned. "This is highly confidential information that only the top hunters have available currently. Please exercise great control. Enemies are heading towards the blessed empire that could cause the deaths of billions if we continue to be complacent." Only 2 sentences, but they made me attach a much greater importance to this file. An enemy coming to attack the empire. My mind's gears were turning as I wrapped my head around this new information and what I should do next. Who could it be? Was it beasts? Or was a war approaching? I was thinking for quite a while but nothing came to mind. I had too little information currently and needed to learn much more. I made some quick calculations and change of plans and shot a text towards the people I had dived into Soliel's castle with 2 days ago. The original plan was to dive with them once more before I began looking at ways to make them stronger and then make my way towards the inner cities of the Empire, but that would have to be accelerated. When I finished that, I placed the file with very troubling information that also held a contact number I would be calling by the end of the day in one of my storage rings and then went into the dungeon. I didn't forget to test the increased effectiveness of my offensive spells after the addition of Sharpen, War Cry, Retaliation, King's Rage, Military Tactics, Unpredictable, and Elemental Damage. The damage of all skills was boosted by quite a bit, with some of the qualities of the skills also improving. Flames of Torment now seemed like it was a coagulation of extremely long and thick heavy flames, the width of it becoming slightly larger. A single explosive rune was now effective to completely cover the huge head of the Titan and cause it to explode right away. As for Smite, the 10 golden blades of light became even larger, their handles even more distinct and edges even sharper. I continued my testing and experimentation of skills for the next 8 hours, clearing the dungeon more than 26 times and coming out around the time I texted the 5 people. It was already evening outside when I left the dungeon with my storage rings full. I was lucky enough to receive another rank B skill, meaning there around a 4% chance for it drop from the rank C titan of this dungeon, as it was very similar to yesterday. More than 17 rank C skills came out this time around, with 6 items. It was 2 pairs of igneous sword S, igneous armor, and fiery boot S of course. There were also a ton of cores after all the runs. The 5 that I texted were situated outside the monolith as I instructed, with Anderson's old party members reverentially looking towards me and Rachel standing there with the same confident expression. They're some of the top hunters of this city, so when they heard that I was clearing the dungeon alone on the news, they must have had an even better idea of what my level of power was than common hunters. I was already spent from running around the past 8 hours and wanted to make it quick. It doesn't seem like I'm going to be in Outer Bank X for much longer, I paused as I watched their expressions change to shock and concern before continuing. So I'll be making sure that there is still a team that is able to clear this dungeon when I leave. Relieved expressions returned, but they still seemed concerned. I didn't bother explaining and took out the pairs of igneous swords S, igneous armor, lightning boots, and fiery boot S along with 22 rank C skill after putting aside 2 that I wanted to absorb later. I had received 2 igneous armors and 1 sword yesterday, and then 2 more of each today. Removing the one I was wearing myself, there were 4 once you added the one that was taken from Anderson. I lied and said that I found most of the skill books and items in Anderson's storage ring. The 2 knights and Rachel looked at me to make sure I wasn't joking before they went forward and grabbed an armor and sword each. The items weren't of much value to me, and I wanted to leave the city without any bad aftertaste, so I had to do this. This was just one of the consequences for taking down the previous rank B hunter of the city. I had Rachel take the fiery boots and Dan grab the lightning boots. Feeling bad for one of mages that wasn't getting anything as there were only 4 armors, but they wouldn't be on the front lines for now. I then laid out the skills for them to choose any that fit them. Everyone was able to gain something this time around, and 15 rank C skills remained after they picked and absorbed the skills in front of me. Once this was done, I took out the rank B skill that dropped today. Enlighten Fervor, build up the strength inside you and release it with a swing of your weapon. I was thinking how I would set up a system where Soliel's castle could be cleared once I was gone, and the easiest answer would be to have a rank B hunter lead the team to clear it. One of the faster ways to do this was to have a hunter with stats nearing the peak of rank C and have them learn a rank B skill. I was struggling with myself this entire day while I was farming the dungeon on whether I would be able to let go of a rank B skill if it was something that fit well with my guidelines currently. Luckily, or unluckily, it was a skill on the far spectrum of berserker skills that also required a weapon, so it made the decision much easier. I also understood that it would become even easier for me to gain rank B skills, whether that was by staying here and diving into Soliel's castle daily to get 1 a day or move towards an area that had a rank B dungeon for me to gain them even faster. So today, I'll be making someone a rank B hunter and have them dive into the dungeon. Chapter 24, an end and a beginning. Of course, the person I was choosing to be the next rank B hunter in Outer Bank X was Rachel, the only person that ever showed a backbone among the hunters I met. She also unflinchingly questioned when she saw something wrong happening, and this was a type of naivety I could trust. She was shocked to receive the skill book and even more shocked when I told her that we'd be entering the dungeon as soon as they finished absorbing some rank C core S. I had so many of these piled up in the last 2 days that a few tens of millions could be made if I chose to sell them, and they should be more than enough to raise the attributes of these hunters to the peak of rank C. I took a few of the piles of core S out of my storage and had the hunters absorb them. They jumped at them after I gave the go-ahead and soon brought their attributes to 200. I watched the sun go lower and lower while waiting for them to finish. When they were done, I let them know that we would be diving into the dungeon right now for me to just confirm Rachel's capabilities against the boss of the dungeon. They could easily take care of the statues appearing in the rooms of the castle with the equipment and new skills they just obtained. Only the boss remained a mystery. The entire group was soon transferred into the familiar landscape that I had appeared in multiple times today. I led the way into the castle and told them all to conserve their energy for the boss fight and let me do all the work on the preliminary monsters. After the 10th room, I could already tune out the sounds of amazement as these hunters watched me take down monsters that they would spend a few minutes on in a matter of seconds. I briefly stopped here for 20 minutes with the excuse of recovering my energy as I didn't want to surprise them too much. I kept using smite all the way through because of its multiple enemy targeting attribute that took care of the increasing number of statues quickly. I wasn't worried about them seeing me cast the rank C skill repeatedly, as higher ranking hunters had enough reserves of energy to cast lower ranking skills multiple times, and at most they would attribute it to some sort of inherent skill that increases my focus. Before we opened the door into the hall where the boss lay, I wasted another 20 minutes with the excuse of recovering my energy just in case something went wrong, and then we entered the boss room. Rachel and the rest of them had been talking up strategies on the way here as they had nothing better to do, and already had a plan that used their new skills the best. The recently buffed up knights went forward with their huge shield as they blocked the 10 guards that the 2 mages then sniped with colorful lightning. Rachel went forward and stood against the boss, activating enlightened fervor and releasing powerful blasts with every swing of her sword that kept the boss at bay. She was soon reinforced by the hunters that had taken down the guards, as the knights focused on blocking the boss while Rachel and the 2 mages continued to damage it. It very quickly roared and boulders began falling from the ceiling, and the mages were quickly covered by the knights while Rachel actually weaved through the falling stones and built up her power using enlightened fervor, releasing a strike that blasted the already damaged head of the titan away. I was standing on the side watching everything, not even bothered when the boulders were falling, as the moment they got in contact with my skin they were repelled away because of the defensive skills that were always activated. I clapped my hands as the team was cheering amongst each other and gave the new rank B hunter a thumbs up. She rushed over and gave me a tight hug, thanking me for all my help and wishing me well for where I was going. I pushed the rest of them away when they continued giving their heartfelt thanks and felt a load lifted off my chest. The city I had been living in all this time would continue to be well even after I left it. I wasn't overly attached or anything like that. I just didn't want the place I had grown familiar with to be wiped off by a dungeon break that could have easily been taken care of. With that out of the way, I parted ways with the hunters and I texted the contact number that was included in the file that I would be ready to head out for Star City tomorrow morning. A reply quickly came: "That's great. We'll have a ride ready for you at 10 a.m. Thank you for your service." With this, I was at the end of my road for Outer Bank X City. I was feeling nostalgic as I walked through the busy streets of downtown while watching the throngs of people move about. Some hunters were celebrating successful dungeon dives by getting drinks, others were mourning the losses of their friends. Those that were unawakened had the same hopeful eyes as I did. Either they were too poor to buy a skill book to awaken, or they were working to save up enough money to do so. You also had the people that were waking up every day hoping to naturally awaken, and they would repeat this process for months. I reached the old dilapidated apartment complex that I was living in and grabbed anything else of value that remained in one of my storage rings. I bought another one because of their high utility and now wore 3 rings on my right hand. I looked at the dilapidated apartment as my emotions rose and I decided to sleep here for the first time in a while. I didn't have any worries about my life as I always had my defensive skills active, and I doubt anyone in the city would be reckless enough to try something like that. It was a split-second decision made from emotions, but I felt like it was a good one. I went into the kitchen, placed some water in a pot, and put it on high heat as I watched it boil. I then opened one of the creaking cabinets and pulled out a cup of ramen noodles. Mixing the two together, I soon had that familiar smell of food I haven't tried in quite a while wafting in my nose. I didn't wait for it to cool as I took a forkful in my mouth, not feeling the usual scalding pain when I ate it too quickly and only feeling a trace of warmth. I thought back to every event this past week and the extreme change that had occurred from it. I still didn't know why I could do the things I do, but I would solve the mystery in time. The world had become a foreign place the moment dungeons, monsters, and hunters began appearing. Nobody thought such a thing would be possible in the past. Neither did I think what happened to me to be remotely possible then. We adapted and survived. I looked out of my apartment into the dark streets outside as I swore to myself that I would continue to grow, and most definitely survive. Noah Osmond. Occupation, Hunter. Vitality, 200 plus 40. Focus, minus. Strength, 200 plus 60. Skill S, F Fireball 100, F Heal 53, Arctic Armor minus 100D, Flames of Torment 100D, Safeguard 38D, Danger Sense 100D, Rough Skin 44D, Fleeting 45C, Arcanist's Fear of Protection 100C, Camouflage 91C, Aura of Haste 88C, Explosive Rune 95C, Life Essence 89C, Increased Penetration 85C, Regeneration 38C, Whirlwind 54C, Smite 68C, Gracefulness 42C, Precision 42C, Adamant 42C, 2C sharpen 19C war cry 19C retaliation 19C king's rage 19C military tactics 19C unpredictable 19C elemental damage 19B giant strength 43B stealth 17 equipment 3XC ring of storage C fiery boots C igneous armor C fiery helm. Chapter 25 Star City. Morning of the next day, I was in the back of a black sedan watching cars rush by as we went down a long road. When we left the roads of Outer Bank X City, we had to pass the only checkpoint for those leaving the city. The checkpoint was near the entrance to an old bridge that was the only road leading towards inner cities. To the left and right of the checkpoint was an expanding wall that circled around the entire city. It was mostly hunters or highly influential people that were able to move around in the empire. The two titles were actually interchangeable as no influential person chose to not awaken. The driver pulled out sparkling military credentials to the hunter guards standing by and we were soon driving away from the city. We went across the bridge when I looked back for the last time to see the city surrounded by a wall, not knowing if I would ever return. The scenery around us quickly changed to destroyed buildings and architectures as we saw guard posts every tens of miles down the road. I couldn't imagine the job of these people that stood in the barrens for days, only switching their shifts when someone else came to relieve them. The barrens were the empty and destroyed lands that nobody was living in. You would only find roaches or rats, or mutated animals that were hungry enough to attack anything there. The only people who took the post as guards along these long roads leading from cities were people that had nothing in life and were offered an olive branch from the government. They were contracted to work for them after they were given the resources to awaken and had to follow the contract for a specified time. I felt sad thinking of the people that had no option but to resort to these kinds of work. We drove through the barrens with no complication, passing other cities surrounded by walls throughout the day. The road got cleaner and cleaner as we went further inland and we saw guard posts more frequently, eventually leaving behind the dystopian barrens and becoming exposed to a few green trees. The greenery kept on increasing as the hours passed and we were soon nearing a huge walled-off city in the distance. This city had a slightly taller wall surrounding it with huge convoys of military trucks moving in and out. It was definitely much more bustling than the cities I've seen on the way here. We were able to get inside after the driver flashed his papers on the guard's face in an annoyed tone as the process was much more thorough this time around. The inside of the city was filled with lights. It had taken the entire day to get here, and after the time it took for us to bypass the gates, night had already arrived. I was able to see the city come to life with countless lights shining into the night. We had arrived at Star City. The streets were so clean with huge buildings pointing to the sky all around us. It was a stark contrast to the destroyed lands we had passed by this morning, as if we were in a completely different world. Masses of people that definitely had happier faces than those I have been used to move around busily. I watched the beauty of the city as if I was back to a time when no dungeons had appeared, as if I had traveled in time to the bustling metropolis I used to know. The scenery constantly changed as we moved further in. I had counted multiple blue monoliths so far, seeing a few rank F, E, and D dungeons based on their size. I was able to see blue monoliths similar in size to Soliel's castle after we passed another checkpoint to go further into the city, counting more than 5 as time passed. The large city continued on as we passed through roads with hunters dressed in military outfits patrolling, arriving at a huge compound that had a sizable monolith with a light orange hue shimmering around it. This monolith was almost twice as big as a rank C monolith, its pressure coming down on me and taking my breath away. I got out of the car and breathed in the air of the city, feeling it to be much fresher than what I've been used to. The driver led the way as we entered the huge compound that was teeming with movement with a scan of his ID. The military compound had a variety of eye-catching buildings all around, with a ton of armored vehicles going in or out. We arrived at the tallest building and went inside. I found myself waiting for a few minutes while seated onto a very comfortable sofa before an imposing man came out. He had a long scar on his jawline with his tanned face glistening in the bright room. A powerful voice broke out from his smiling face. "Mr. Osmont, I was very glad you could make it." The rough voice rang out clearly as I observed the man in front of me, noticing him to be very different from the people I've come in contact with. I smiled back and said it's only right I come for something as important as this. The discussion went well after this as the man introduced himself. He was Vice Admiral Magner, earning my goodwill as the first thing he mentioned after his name was how he wanted to personally come to meet me as soon as I arrived. "Now, I know you must be tired from the trip, so formalities can wait until tomorrow. Commander Kyle will lead you to your resting area, where food and entertainment will be provided. The Vice Admiral finished his introduction and left as I began thinking about the words he had said. Entertainment. Commander Kyle led me away and we walked to the living quarters while I thought about how I planned to live in this city. The first thing on my mind was finding out exactly what major threat was quickly approaching, and the second was my capabilities to solo that huge dungeon monolith near this compound. I'm already assuming that the first time I'll dive in it I'll be accompanied by a team, which is a safe way to play it as I currently have no idea about the increase in difficulty from rank C to B after we finish the first dive. I'll make my decision then. We passed a few serious faces and I was given a smooth blue ID card that only had a golden letter B on it. Kyle mentioned that this card allowed access for a majority of the facilities in here and also had access to the room in front of us. I thanked him for taking me around and he saluted and left. I scanned the key card and opened the door, expectant to see the living quarters of rank B hunters that the government provided. The room was slightly bigger than the large rooms in the pristine residency, boasting even more luxurious looks all around it. On the table were a wide array of foods and next to it was a huge bed, where a woman with a statuesque figure was flashing the brightest smile. Oh. Chapter 26, The Looming Threat. So, last night was different to say the least, as I found myself getting some sleep later than usual. The food and everything else hit the spot, taking my mind off the many thoughts constantly clashing in my head. A hunter's stamina was nothing to laugh at. I went out of the room early in the morning to walk around the living quarters and observe the compound a bit more. Even though it was this early, there was already bustling activities with people and trucks moving about. I enjoyed the cool morning air and looked towards the huge monolith a distance away, itching to go towards it and give it a go, but I calmed myself down and walked back to the living quarters. Someone quickly called out my name. It was Commander Kyle saying that the Vice Admiral was looking for me. I nodded at him to lead the way and found myself led into an office room that had an abundant amount of folders and papers lying around. I apologize for the mess. Please have a seat. The imposing Vice Admiral has his usual air of confidence as I sat down opposite him. I didn't waste any time as I asked the thing that was heavily weighing on my mind. Magyar paused for a second before pulling out a red folder and laying out multiple photos across the table. These are aerial pictures of the Barrens quite a distance away from the Empire. They were taken over a span of a few weeks. The pictures showed a terrifying sight of small dark dots that were uncountable, and large mass that could clearly be seen in the middle of it all. The large mass had a patterned obsidian shell that covered its entirety, only having a large head with pointed horns come out in the front. The pictures gave me a shock because these things were probably even bigger than they appeared on there. The rest of the pictures showed a similar scene, making me prompt the general to continue as I didn't grasp everything yet. These pictures were taken at a different location each time. They are moving. The Vice Admiral had a cold expression as he looked at the pictures and said this. My mind was moving. To keep up as I took all of this in and asked him how long do we have. Magyar looked at me with a difficult expression before sighing. That's the problem. We don't know. It could be in a few weeks or a month, but we cannot correctly track them because of their unpredictability. A few weeks. Possibly a month. Phew. I let out a relieved sigh as I heard and laughed out loud, startling the man before me. I looked towards him and said, if it is a few weeks, then we have more than enough time to prepare. I knew myself, and it was why I said this. Barely a week after I awakened and I was already standing in a position to hear information that many people had no idea about. If I was given another week or two, I was confident in getting much stronger than where I am right now. The question is, what strength will be enough to contend with the huge beast and the things it was bringing this way? I asked the Vice Admiral whether they were confident in pushing these monsters back and his reply was less than favorable, adopting a dark expression that contained a trace of anger. He spent the next 2 minutes ranting about how they were not fully prepared, but the people at the top were still hesitant to institute measures to prepare for what was coming. The cities in the outer periphery of the Empire had to start the process of migrating soon, or the military needed to increase and institute its main defenses past those cities and prepare for the fight that was coming. Otherwise, a tremendous amount of people would be sacrificed for nothing. I listened to this as my mind went back to all the cities I passed when coming here, and one of the cities at the outermost of the Empire, Outer Bank X. My gaze turned cold when I looked back at the Vice Admiral. He saw my eyes and then said, I've already rallied the relevant people though. Even though there is still some pushback, We have already begun the process of moving supplies and equipment to the front lines of defense in the outer perimeters. He continued when he saw my gaze calming down. While this will be an ongoing process to fortify our defenses on the border, we also need hunters to lend their help in diving into dungeons and bringing out as many resources as possible. Core S, Item S, Skill Book S, they will all go towards the awakened soldiers that will be giving up their lives to fight on the front line. He finished with a sad expression as he mentioned the people that would be the first line of contact between us and monsters. I thought about all this and asked how they were doing things currently. We have 3 teams of 6 rank B hunters alternating like clockwork to clear the rank B dungeon. Mangrove Swamp. The 3 teams are able to clear the dungeon 3 times a day and have a rest period in between, with other similar teams acting the same manner in nearby cities, but we don't know if it'll be enough. He looked at me as he said the next words. That's where people like you come in. I haven't met any rank B hunters that have been able to dive alone into a rank C dungeon repeatedly, so your power should be among the highest. I would love your cooperation to hasten this process with one of the teams we have clearing Mangrove Swamp. He said these words carefully while watching my face. I thought over everything and the amount of time we possibly had before nodding my head. When is the next team diving? A relieved expression appeared on his face as he told me the next team was going in within an hour. We then discussed how the resources were split up between the hunter teams diving in Mangrove Swamp. The military would pay handsomely for all the Core S, Item S, and Skill S they received while providing for all their needs. If you became a hunter enlisted in the military, you would be given a rank with even more benefits. I thought about everything and decided to go with the plan of seeing the Mangrove Swamp while diving with a team. I would decide how to move forward from there. The talk with the Vice Admiral finished on a happy note, with him leading me to personally meet the rank B hunting squad I would be joining today. Half the group had already gotten together and I got the chance to meet the first genuine rank B hunters. Their mannerisms were a notch above other hunters and their bodies seemed packed with power that could explode at any moment. These were rank B hunters that could bring their attributes all the way to 250. When paired up with corresponding skills, it was a deadly force to behold. The first 3 that I met were 2 berserkers, one holding a broad sword that was just as tall as him and the other holding long blades on either side of him. The third one was a short woman that was about 4'1" in height, and she was surprisingly the knight of the team. The power emanating from her in no way matched her stature, as a huge tower shield larger than her was strapped to her back. I got acquainted with the 3 while the rest of the team came in. They were all relatively polite with a mild interest in their eyes when we were talking, with the only one different being the short woman who went by the name Lana Stone. She was staring at me with eyes that blazed with fire as she showed much more interest than the others. The remaining team members were 2 mages, a man and a woman dressed in long purple robes with long staffs sparkling with ice elements. The last one was another knight, this one with a round golden shield covering half of his body and a flail on his other hand. More introductions followed and the 6 usual rank B hunters that were about to dive into the Mangrove Swamp were joined by me. Chapter 27 - Mangrove Swamp. I didn't like the Mangrove Swamp the instant we were transferred in. We appeared in the middle of muddy ground where I could feel my feet sink in a couple of inches. All around us were huge mangrove trees that shot to the sky. The smell was horrendous. From the information the hunters gave me before we came, this land where we were transferred to was the innermost small patch of land surrounded by a muddy swamp. Our enemies would be coming all around us from the innermost ring of the swamp. The swamp was special as it had multiple rings. The first wave of enemies we would be facing would all be from the first ring, and the moment all those enemies were killed, a barrier between the innermost ring and the second wider ring would dissipate. The moment that barrier dissipated, all the monsters from the second ring would rush towards you. There were 5 rings in the entire swamp, with the 5th ring releasing the boss. This really was a killer dungeon. I didn't like the sticky and hard to move in environment, but my mind couldn't help but think of the possibilities of this dungeon with my abilities. To prevent the complete wipeout of the hunting squads, the hunters designated one of the monsters they faced with the title of Princess. They could kill all other monsters besides this princess. She had to be protected at all cost. Otherwise, the moment she dies, the second barrier will break and more enemies will rush in before they could catch their breath. I understood their entire system and soon began to feel the earth trembling beneath my feet. Humongous monsters were coming. The first one entering my eyes was a 4-meter large alligator, its huge jaws wide open as it lunged at our group. I instantly cast Flames of Torment and flung the thick pillar of flames forward as if it were a spear heading directly into the open jaws. SSS. Sounds of meat being burnt rang out, with a burnt smell right after as the inside of the alligator was destroyed by the rotating pillar of flames. I was thankful that this rank D skill had reached 100 proficiency and continued to be enhanced by support skills that allowed it to take down rank B monsters. Aha, good work newbie. The short tank, Lana Stone, was holding the tower shield twice her size, shouted as she and the rest of the group members moved to block and attack the other incoming alligators. I'll hold on to the princess. The other tank with a flail and golden shield said as his body glowed blue and withstood the charges of other alligators. The berserker with the broadsword held his sword now enveloped with flames and swiped at the neck of another one, making a clear clean cut as if there was no resistance from their scaly armor. The other berserker with two swords struck out and unleashed a huge cross-shaped sword light that went forward to butcher another set of alligators. The two mages weren't lagging behind as they had already cast their spells. The area in front of them quickly became icy and froze all the incoming alligators, which is when the berserkers came in and shattered them with a swing of their swords. The mages then pulled back behind Lana before continuing to cast other spells. I liked their teamwork and began moving seriously myself. 10 golden swords appeared in the air and rushed down to each of the remaining alligators besides the princess, piercing their hard dry scales and nailing them to the ground. I did this repeatedly a few times, taking down tens of alligators before the hunting squad looked at me in surprise after witnessing the enhanced power of smite and shouted words of encouragement soon after as they went to reinforce the knight with the golden shield on holding off the princess. Newbie, I knew I felt something special from you. Don't hold back, Lana said as she went to help hold off the one remaining alligator, her small body powerfully moving the large tower shield as if it was weightless. The two knights rotated on holding off the princess until 10 minutes passed when everybody had regained most of their energy. A sword bathed in flames ended its life. A sound was heard as if a bubble had popped, before even more tremors could be heard as more alligators rushed in. The squad members always stayed in a tight-knit formation throughout, with the mages and I in the middle, the knights and berserkers on the outside. Even while being swarmed by tens of alligators, they held them off successfully. I was casting smite after about every minute thereafter, cleaning off a majority of the alligators without completely overpowering everything and making the short tank throw me even more fiery gazes. The chosen princess of this round was kept alive for 20 minutes before everyone was good to go once more. We repeated this process until the third and fourth barrier was released, the thrill getting to me as I watched these powerful rank B hunters throw out skills in similar power to mine. The release of the fourth barrier was only done after a princess had been held down for half an hour, the hunter squad regaining their strength at their peak before all of their gazes focused on the male mage. They seemed to come to an understanding as they nodded their heads and told me to not go away from them under any circumstances while we began clearing this next wave. I nodded curiously as I waited to see what surprise they were going to pull off as I watched more than 100 huge alligators desperately clawing their way towards us. The mage held his staff forward as he was protected in a circle and aimed it toward the incoming monsters. 30 seconds passed with nothing happening, and then the heat began to rapidly rise all around us. I was shocked as I looked up and saw balls of thick magma raining from the sky and barreling down to the large groups of alligators making their way here. Boom. Sounds like bombs were constantly going off could be heard whenever the large balls of magma fell down and burned everything around it, turning any that were near into mincemeat. More than half of the alligators were wiped out with this one attack. My eyes shined as I looked at the heavily panting mage that had fallen to the ground. That type of skill. I wanted one. My heart was pounding as I replayed the scene of the raining magma balls from before. This skill, I really did want one badly. If I could grab a skill like this, with my abilities. I was imagining how I could easily clear out large groups of monsters in seconds. I was daydreaming too much as someone had to scream to get my attention back to the monsters. Come on newbie, don't lay there gaping and let's take care of the remaining beasts. The miniature tank was laughing crazily as she went forward to block the remaining wave that had reached us. I clicked my tongue while bringing back my focus and cast smite once more. I shaved off a majority of the remaining crocodiles by casting the 10 golden blades every 30 seconds. With the two berserkers butchering with their swords, only a princess soon remained. The moment this remaining alligator was killed, an unimaginably large titan would be coming for us. I was curious to see how they usually handled this boss if their mage chose to cast such a powerful skill just before to avoid being surrounded by hundreds of alligators. Which hunter would come out with another surprise now? Chapter 28 - Mangrove Swamp 2. I was expectantly waiting for another surprise from these genuine rank B hunters. One showed an extremely powerful skill that took out tens of rank B monsters in a blink, although it seemed to be at the cost of her entire mana reserves. The knights continued to solidly defend even when they had tens of monsters surrounding them, never letting a single one pass through to their squad members. I wouldn't be waiting long to see the boss as half an hour quickly passed and the last princess was killed. I waited to hear the furious tremors of a huge titan rushing through the swamp, but instead just felt the entire swamp shake once, with everything going silent after. It then shook once more a few seconds after. These were just its steps. I was shocked while feeling the tremors that traveled through the murky waters. The titan was slowly making its way towards us in unhurried steps. This was something that would instill fear into the hearts of hunters, but looking at these veterans that had dived into this dungeon multiple times before, they had determined expressions while waiting for the boss. The berserker holding the huge broadsword spoke to me. Continue casting your golden blades to disrupt its attention when the fight starts. If you can aim them at its eyes, it'll reduce its combat power even if it can still sense us. I nodded and prepared to face off against the huge beast on the horizon. It felt like a big mountain was gradually coming closer as the beast neared, its scales shining a dark green color, with its eyes shining a terrifying light. It looked at us a distance away as its humongous jaws opened and an unnatural sound came out. Ooh! The sound was grating to the ears as the huge alligator's mouth now showed rows and rows of glistening sharp teeth. Its upper jaw was much wider than the lower one, causing its teeth to be completely hidden when its jaws were snapped shut. But now that it was open, the sight was horrible to behold. The man with the flaming sword continued with his direction spread out. Knights, keep it busy, and don't get eaten. The two knights nodded as this wasn't the first time, and they took their positions to the left and right of the alligator. The flames on the sword the berserker was holding began to dance wildly before they exploded and went to cover the entire body of the hunter. I was startled at this type of skill as the man in front of me had his body wreathed in flames. A howl escaped from him as he rushed forward to meet the titan head-on. There was a blinding expanse of light as the berserker was flung back right away, looking like a huge fireball. 10 golden blades had quickly appeared and half of them went towards each eye in a straight line. A pain sound rang out as the eyes of the humongous alligator were ruptured with pus leaking out. The berserker with dual blades took this chance to release 2 large sword lights that smacked onto the right side of the alligator, heavily injuring it. It didn't sit still as it turned to the side, and the next thing we knew, a scaly tail twice our size was shining in green light as it whizzed its way towards us. The two knights shouted as their bodies glowed and transparent shields of light appeared in front both of them when the tail struck. Boom! The land shook from the impact, but knights stood their ground and the strike was stopped. Continuing with the momentum, a flaming berserker rushed in once more, spinning in the air as he constantly released fire blades that struck down on the head of the alligator. I cast Smite once again and had the 10 blades aimed towards its open jaws when it was howling in pain, rupturing the softer skin inside. The remaining mage that was silent all this time finally acted. Her glimmering staff pointed forward as an icicle the size of a car came down and pierced the already mangled head of the titan, cutting short its screams as blood and brain matter splattered all around. My blood was boiling as I watched all of these fantastical skills and couldn't wait to start amassing higher-ranked skills of my own. I looked at the corpse of the disfigured titan and promised myself to run this dungeon at least tens of times in the coming days to see what rank B skills would pop out, and of course, the rare chance of a rank A skill dropping. The hunting squad members were cheering at the finished raid as a green crystal appeared. Lana came towards me and said, "Not bad, newbie. Those blades of yours allowed us to finish our raid in record time. Our profits are about to increase." The rest of the members laughed as they gathered together and checked to see if anybody was injured. The mage that had cast the amazing-looking skill where magma balls fell from the sky was up on his feet again as they collected the loot and prepared to leave the dungeon. I looked around me at the multitude of alligator corpses, and the even larger one by the side. I knew I could clear this dungeon if I came in alone, but it would take me a lot of time to take down hundreds of alligators and this huge beast, and I loved clearing dungeons as quickly as possible. My highest ranking offensive skill was C, and I felt like I needed a high damage rank B skill similar to these hunters for an even smoother boss run. The face of a chiseled man popped in my head as I thought about what to do next. After the core S and an item that dropped were collected, we placed our hands on the green crystal and were transferred to the outside world once more. Officers that were standing guard near the monolith were surprised and checked their watches when we came out. The dungeon was completed in under 3 hours this time around because of my addition. I took down the contact information of the rank B hunters as they invited me to go with them to celebrate. I thought about it as I recalled I hadn't really associated myself in any social settings for quite a while. Maybe this would be something good to do. The dungeon wasn't going anywhere, and a few hours of new places wouldn't hurt. I told them I'd catch up with them as I already planned to do something else at the moment and went towards the office of the Vice Admiral. Bypassing the many security points, I came back to the office filled with stacks of paper once again. Magyar looked at an antique clock on the wall before smiling at me and saying everything went well, I presume. Very, and I would love to continue to help, but I'm going to need a favor from you first. The man's eyes perked up as he listened to my words. This time around, I wanted to look through the offensive rank B skills in the hands of the military that I could learn to make my run of the dungeon even smoother. Even if I was good enough to beat it now, being even more prepared was not an issue. I could have jumped into the dungeon and spent some time clearing it for rank B skills, but the drops were random, so I would never know how long I'd be diving before a skill that I actually wanted to use drops. The lower ranking skills were also quickly losing their effectiveness, as the rank F fireball would not dent the scales of rank B monsters and wasn't used even once the entire dungeon dive. Just a single rank B skill. I can make something like that happen, let me call someone in. I nodded at him and waited by the side. A minute later, a woman dressed in business wear came into the room and greeted the Vice Admiral. Boss, here's the document you wanted. Magyar nodded at her as he grabbed the thick book and handed it to me. This is the inventory of all rank B skills that haven't been distributed yet. Let us know which one fits your taste and we'll take it out of storage for you. Magyar looked at the hunter in front of him that was intently looking through the inventory of skill books and smiled at the achievement of recruiting another excellent hunter. Seeing how he almost halved the dungeon run, his help would continue to bring in even more resources in the weeks to come. He just hoped this hunter's addition along with everything else they were trying to do would bolster their strength enough to stand against what was coming. What they really needed were more of the peak rank hunters, but they couldn't be cultivated as quickly. He was also looking favorably at the hunter in front of him as another candidate, as his power had skyrocketed just in the past week. Maybe there were still more surprises from him. Chapter 29, The Colosseum. The book held a list of many more skills than I expected, making me spend some time deciding my first rank B offensive skill. A disastrous skill caught my eye with its high damage potential and the fact that it would match extremely well with the mangrove swamp's huge clusters of alligators that would swarm towards me once I went in alone. I let the Vice Admiral know of my selection and spent a few minutes talking while the assistant went out, coming back 10 minutes later with a suitcase that held a thick book. I received the suitcase and absorbed the skill miniature tornado. For 10 seconds, unleash a rotating column of sharp winds that follow your commands. The skill appeared in my panel without an issue, and I was looking forward to spamming as much of it as I could when hundreds of alligators swarmed me from all sides. I gave my thanks to the Vice Admiral and stepped out of the office. The short tank, Lana Stone, had already sent an address on my phone of where I should be joining them. I'll indulge myself in this bit of socializing before going back to my lone ways of decimating dungeons. I got out of the military sector and got a ride towards the location. The streets of Star City were packed with energy and people, making you rethink whether half the land had really been turned into a desolate wasteland and people were still fighting for their lives. This being one of the core defense cities of the Empire, there were very few incidents of monsters causing deaths and destruction once things stabilized. The unawakened people thus looked up to the hunters that were diving into dungeons to protect them every day and aspired to be like them. The car neared a grand structure that could be seen from anywhere in the city. It took my breath away as I remembered seeing videos of structures like these that were in multiple inner cities across the Empire. The excited faces of people rushing in through the huge double doors and the shouts and screams could already be heard from here. This was the place where hunters fought and competed for fun. This was the Colosseum. I shot a text to Lana that I was here, and someone approached me a few minutes after to lead me past the lines of people. Booming sounds of boos and cheers were already resounding throughout the huge building as we went in and neared spaces with fewer people. The Colosseum was built similar to those in ancient cultures, a huge oval amphitheater with thousands of seats. The hunting squad had a huge space all to themselves close to the arena floor in the middle where there were already hunters fighting. I joined them and watched the ongoing match, which seemed to be between two rank C hunters. The fights were brutal, as the bloodier they were the more cheers the crowd gave. Drinks and food were already brought in and we began talking when the short tank turned to me and screamed in my ears over the loud cheering. We might be lucky enough to see an amazing show in a few minutes. Apparently Lightning Hand is bored enough once again and is announcing a competition soon. I listened to her words as I recalled who Lightning Hand was. This was one of the few known rank hunters of the Empire. I didn't realize he was in Star City. What was someone strong like him about to do? The fight between the two rank C hunters was gradually coming to a close as the mage ran out of mana and was now being beaten to a pulp by the berserker. The crowd was screaming like they were possessed as a ringing sound was heard and the fight was finished. The cheers reached an even higher pitch when the match was done and a burly man with his body crackling with lightning appeared on the 4 huge screens in the middle of the Colosseum. He was standing in a section close to us surrounded by pretty women when he grabbed a mic and his booming voice could be heard throughout. "Hello citizens of Star City." The strong voice rang out like a clap of lightning and the cheers from the spectators reached a fevered pitch. "We're in for a great show today, as I will be putting forth a prize that no hunter can say no to." Lightning Hand rose his hand in the air as a thick book appeared between his fingers. "This, my dear citizens, is the rank as skill book, Flight." The crowd went silent for a second before even louder cheers resounded. My mind received a shock as I looked up at the man on the screen and the glistening skill book he was holding. The hunting squad members got up from their seats as serious expressions rose on their faces. The man whose body had tendrils of lightning dancing on it continued for today only. "In the next 30 minutes, the winner of a free-for-all fight will get to take this bad boy home." The loud screams continued to increase as hunters from all over the stadiums rose up with greedy faces. This was a rank A skill, something that rarely dropped in rank B dungeons, and only ever came out from the dungeons that very few hunters could delve in. This was the dream of many hunters. Even I was expectant to get my hands on something like this. Blight, something that literally allowed you to, well, fly. Now, for all the hunters that want to participate, jump into the ring. The moment his words finished, multiple hunters began jumping from their seats onto the huge circular arena at the center of the Colosseum. Hunters were greedy for skills but were smart enough not to lose their lives. Most of the ones that jumped in were rank C hunters and a few rank BS. The members of the hunting squad looked at each other before the short tank said, "Haha, let's put our restrictions aside and see which person is lucky enough to get this pie falling from the sky." The rest of them nodded at this and also jumped down to join the hunters on the ground. I looked at the outpouring of hunters that were filling the arena and rose up myself. It was already half filled with dense numbers of hunters that were putting their lives on the line. I looked at this and jumped down myself with a sigh. I really couldn't sit out on something like this. Rank A skills were so rare that getting another skill like this would be near impossible unless you farmed the high-ranking dungeon tens or hundreds of times. Even now I was questioning why this rank A hunter was giving it away on a whim. He continued talking as the hunters continued to fill into the arena. "The rules for the free-for-all are simple. The last man standing wins." The crowd had gone crazy as the build-up to the fight continued, with people standing up hysterically shouting as if they were the ones getting the prize. A few minutes passed by with no other hunters jumping into the ring. Lightning Hand looked around the densely packed arena and raised his arm. Quietness ensued in the huge Colosseum before he brought it down and shouted, "Start." Chapter 30, Free for All. The arena was filled with screams as soon as the fight started, with explosions of skills bouncing from all around. The rank C hunters were taking each other out without a question, their eyes filled with greed. The lower-ranked hunters here were those whose greed had surpassed their common sense, as the sane ones stayed on their seats to keep on watching the moment they realized the people competing for this would mostly be rank B. I watched the scene of chaos unfolding in front of me as I smiled and activated both stealth and camouflage. I disappeared from the sights of all the hunters and watched the scene while fully protected with multiple defensive skills that brushed off any spell that accidentally came my way. The audience was screaming in a frenzy as they watched the bloody fight below, calling for more blood anytime someone fell. Rank B hunters gradually began to move in full force, devastating skills beginning to fly out. The squad I had dived into mangrove swamp with were all far apart fighting their own battles, but one of the mages was already knocked out cold. At the center of attention was a hunter holding 2 round shields with his body bathed in golden light. This knight pushed back all attacks and hunters that neared him with explosive blasts of white light the moment they neared. Multiple hunters were falling just from him alone. Opposite on the other side was a woman holding a bow that was shooting flaming arrows and heavily wounding the hunters that were struck. I watched all of this while evading any hunters rushing about and absorbing the stray attacks without the notice from any hunters. The bloody fight continued until most of the rank C hunters were knocked out, leaving 9 rank B hunters on the floor of the arena intently staring at each other. Ah! One of them couldn't hold on any longer and let out a battle cry, while rushing to another hunter nearest to him. Another brawl ensued, with the hunter holding the 2-round shields continuing to push away any skills and attack with explosive blasts of white light. From the hunting squad I knew, only the berserker with the flaming sword continued, his entire body wreathed in flames once more as he took on 2 other hunters by himself. The rest of the team members were knocked out cold or sitting out injured. I found a relatively far place in the arena away from the fight that had a ton of rank C hunters either knocked out or struggling painfully and sat down while continuing to observe the fight. My aim was to do very little work and defeat the last hunter standing that should be exhausted to obtain this rank A skill easily. The hard fight continued as it came down to 2 hunters facing off in the arena. The hunter bathed in a golden light that was holding 2 shields and the hunter with a bow that shot scalding hot flames. Their standoff was building up the anticipation among the audience as the cheers continued. I was looking forward to doing very little work and win when I felt the air change. Instead of heading towards each other, 2 hunters turned towards my location at the same time. Well shit. I stood up and got ready for the fight early as it seemed the hunters saw through my stealth and camouflage. Did they have a skill that helped in detection or something else? Oh well, it doesn't matter anyway. A bright smile bloomed on my face as I watched the woman draw her bow and shoot multiple flaming arrows towards me, and the shining knight rushed forward. I would at least get a chance to test the destructive force of the newly gained skill against 2 rank B hunters that seemed to be standing at the peak of this rank. Miniature tornado was cast for the first time. A swirling mass of sharp winds appeared in front of me that dispersed the flame arrows that were rushing towards me and pushed back the glowing knight. I felt the winds move my dark hair around as I commanded the skill to go towards the nearest hunter. The body of the glowing knight expanded. Wow, his body actually expanded as the blinding light shooting out of him increased, withstanding the heavy and sharp winds until the skill faded a few seconds after as it had a 10-second duration. His body came back to normal size while he was roughly breathing, seeming proud of being able to withstand the attack. I gave a light laugh as I shook my head and cast another miniature tornado. The knight's face turned ashen as he saw another coming right at him and used the 2 shields to try and withstand the rotating winds to no avail, being blown away with cuts all over his body a second after. The remaining hunter on the field that was shooting arrows had moved a further distance away from me while continuing to shoot. I wouldn't let her have her way as I used whirlwind to close the distance and cast another miniature tornado at her position. The rapidly rotating winds swiped the hunter off her feet, inflicting heavy damage on the armor and skin beneath it, the force ultimately blasting her onto the walls of the arena. Silence followed after as I stood in a field of hunters that were either knocked out or crying painfully, with a few missing some limbs. Wah! The crowd's cries reached another decibel higher as they saw the end of the fight, and the booming voice of the rank A hunter could be heard. Aha! Good, good, good. The man repeated the same words 3 times before he leapt up from the area he was in and fell down towards the arena like a strike of lightning. He looked me up and down and laughed once more before pulling out a glistening book from his storage ring. Calm yet careful, smart, and also powerful. Aha! This skill book isn't wasted on you. It was supposed to go to the rank B hunter with the highest achievements in the city, but I'm impulsive and I believe in opportunity and luck. This is your fortune. The skill book was carried by a thin layer of sparkling electricity and drifted towards me. I was marveling at the skills of a rank A hunter while looking at this monster of a man in front of me. His body seemed like a volcano ready to erupt and smash anything standing on its way. I knew I wasn't ready to face someone like this yet. My attributes had only just broke through to rank B because of some support skills, and I needed to put in a lot more work if I wanted to catch up to people at this stage before everything crumbled. Thank you for the opportunity. I grabbed the skill book, absorbing it right then and there without wasting a single second as I thanked the man surrounded by lightning. Use it wisely and try to reach for higher places, he nodded as his body lifted off the ground effortlessly, leaving behind a few words before shooting up to skies and being gone in a flash of light. I could barely follow the speed of that lightning as it went away, making me even more excited to go back to my lone ways of dungeon diving and quickly gain that level of strength. Chapter 31. Gradually moving forward. I watched the flash of lightning disappear on the horizon and went around the arena to look for the hunting squad members. Some were knocked out cold, but they all had only minor injuries. With the strength of a rank B hunter, wounds like that would heal after a long night's sleep or a few healing spells. The crowd was calming down as the defeated hunters got up and left the arena. I said my goodbyes to the hunters that were already up and moving and left all my attention on getting stronger by farming dungeons until the strength of rank A wasn't far away from me. I passed by the overcrowded exit with people rushing about and walked out of the Colosseum, making my way back to the military complex. After passing through all the checkpoints, I didn't go back to the living quarters and went straight toward the mangrove swamp. Strength was respected in this city. I didn't plan on hiding in the shadows for too long. I'll show them a glimpse of what I can do while still hiding a major part of my strength to account for any unknowns. Because of the incoming threats of beasts though, there would be no use hiding my strength as it would gradually be shown in time. I thought about turning on stealth and disappearing from everyone's eyes when I first entered the dungeon alone, but decided otherwise. Unless a peak rank B hunter similar to the ones I found in the Colosseum coincidentally happened to pass by when I activated the skill, I should be able to control the information of how frequently I entered this dungeon by choosing when to turn stealth on and off to be purposefully seen. I will go in the first time without hiding, and turn on stealth when I inevitably beat the dungeon in record time. I'll keep myself hidden during these times so that my impossible clear time will be kept under wraps. I showed my ID to the confused guards patrolling around the dungeon as they watched me with increasingly shocked expressions go towards the dungeon and disappear from their sight. What? He went in by himself. Magyar abruptly stood up while listening to the report that just came in. The gears in his mind were turning as he asked himself if he had struck gold with this hunter while seeing this show of confidence, or if he had miscalculated entirely and wasted some resources. His impassive look came back to his face as he thought, only time will tell. At another location in one of the luxurious hotels in Star City, a man was fuming from a phone call he just received. He was a veteran rank B hunter that was halfway through becoming rank A. He was already holding 2 rank A skills, and needed just one more to fully be considered a legitimate A ranker that could dive into the highest dungeons known. A book that had dropped recently and was in the possession of Lightning Hand was supposed to go to the next rank B hunter on a list. His name was at the top of that list. Yet Lightning Hand had played around with the book and gifted it to some random rank B by making up a competition in the middle of the day. He couldn't even look at the direction of the rank A hunter that recklessly gave the skill away, but he could definitely go after that rank B hunter who received it. He thought of this as he pulled out his phone to dial another number. In the unfortunate event that the hunter dies, he will still get his hands on that rank A skill. I appeared on that same patch of land surrounded by murky green waters all around me. The rushing of alligators could already be felt the moment I entered. This time around, there would not be any games of keeping one alive to rest or relax. I let out a cheeky smile as I prepared to get started. This will be a constant and relentless fight all the way through. Without a second wasted. The first order of business was checking out flight. My body slowly began lifting off the ground when the skill was activated, following my thoughts while slowly rising. If I thought about moving up, I moved up. Any direction I wanted and I could do it in a heartbeat. I hovered a few meters in the air and enjoyed the feeling when the alligators reached the small patch of land and jumped up with their wide jaws open. I looked at these fumbling alligators below me and decided to get started. This time around, I won't be stopping. I'll bulldoze through everything with as much power as I can without worrying too much. I didn't even start off like usual by casting the skills gradually while watching these monsters die. A miniature tornado appeared at the center of the alligators, and then another 2 appeared to their left and right, and they kept on increasing. The rotating forces of the miniature tornado shredded the hard scales of the alligators as if they were paper and turned them to mincemeat, very quickly turning the scene below into a mixture of blood and gore. The first barrier was released and more alligators were rushing where I was, but I would not wait for them. I commanded my body to fly forward, testing the speed of the skill for the first time. The result? Fast. How fast I didn't know, as I didn't even know how to measure myself, but I was able to get to the point where the first barrier disappeared in a few seconds just as the new alligators were rushing in. If I could put it into words, then just as fast as a car speeding down a highway, if not faster. Miniature tornado was cast once again, as multiple swirling vortexes appeared and shredded everything on sight. The next minutes passed like this, with me flying around the mangrove swamp casting miniature tornado on every beast that I saw. It wasn't long before the last barrier was broken and the huge slumbering titan rose up. What met it were constantly replenishing miniature tornado, where a new one would appear the moment one disappeared. Roar. The large rank B beast that required multiple rank B hunters to hunt it could put up no defenses or cast any skills on the face of multiple and never-ending disastrous tornadoes, quickly letting out a roar before dying. I breathed out loudly as I controlled my breathing to calm down. This was how I would start to do things from now on. I won't care too much about the thoughts of others and their reactions, not if I continue with such rapid progress. This whole dungeon took me 30 minutes or slightly more. I wouldn't let it go this time around. I had already been collecting the rank B core S as the monsters fell, and I did the same when the huge titan was shredded and dropped more of them and a rank B skill book. I recalled how Soliel's castle had a chance to drop a higher rank skill even though it was a rank C dungeon, and wondered how many times I had to repeat the rank B dungeon mangrove swamp before a rank A skill book dropped. My eyes shined with excitement as I looked forward to this while I stayed in the air and absorbed the rank B cores right away. The skill book dropped this time around was Curse of Slowness, a curse-type skill I haven't come across before that majorly slowed down the speed of the enemy it hit. I didn't know when I would use this but I absorbed it anyway. I would take in all that I can and think later. As soon as the core S dropped in the dungeon were absorbed, I reached out to the green crystal that had risen and was transferred outside the monolith with stealth still active. The core S from one dungeon run were nowhere enough to have me reach the peak of rank B vitality and strength attribute without diving a few times even if I was doing it solo. The higher you rose, the more cores of equivalent rank you needed to raise your attributes. The focus cores that weren't useful to me would all be sold later. I went towards one of the square doors of the monolith as I disappeared inside once again. This time, I will continue to dive into this dungeon even after the sun sets. Chapter 32, A Challenge. My dungeon diving that was filled with vigor continued for the next few hours. On the 10th dungeon run, I had maxed out my vitality and strength attributes by absorbing all of the cores that dropped, bringing me to the peak of rank B. I only dived 3 more times after that before calling it a night. I was lucky enough to receive an item or skill book on every single one of those 13 runs, with all of them being rank B even though everything randomly dropped. I was able to pick up one defensive skill similar to Arcanist's Sphere of Protection that was called Golden Halo, which when cast would form a halo of light around my body that rejected any attacks directed at it. One was an offensive mage skill called Doom Bolt, which called forth a dark red lightning bolt that had even higher damage than Miniature Tornado as it could stun the Titan of Mangrove Swamp with one hit. The only downside was that it was a single target skill. There were 3 skills that required specific weapons to be cast so they would be left out to be exchanged later, and the remaining 5 skills were support skills that buffed me in all sorts of ways. Lightfoot and Windrider both collectively increased my speed by 100%, increasing how quickly I moved and flew to an insane degree. Rigorous increased the effects of all defensive skills by 50%, and Shadow Veil was another skill similar to Stealth and Camouflage that I was confident once I had this activated, only rank A hunters would have a chance of noticing me. The last skill that came out in these first 13 runs, Wild Heart, was my favorite as it increased the damage all my skills dealt by 50%, continuing to make the damage of my skills even deadlier and causing rank D skills to still be somewhat usable even at this point. Not a single rank A skill was in sight even after these 13 dives, disappointing me but also making me even more expectant for when one actually drops. There were 3 items that dropped along with the skills, 2 of them being Scale Armor and a Fang Sword. Scale Armor was a rank B item that had vastly better defenses than the rank C Igneous Armor, so I changed those right away. Noah Osmond Occupation, Hunter. Vitality, 250 plus 40. Focus, minus. Strength, 250 plus 60. Skill S, FED Flames of Torment 100D Safeguard 57D Danger Sense 100D Rough Skin 100D Fleeting 100C Arcanist Sphere of Protection 100C Camouflage 100C Aura of Haste 100C Explosive Rune 100C Life Essence 100C Increased Penetration 100C Regeneration 88C Whirlwind 89C Smite 95C Gracefulness 100C Precision 100C Adamant 100C Sharpen 100C Warcry 100C Retaliation 100C King's Rage 100C Military Tactics 100C Unpredictable 100C Elemental Damage 100B Giant Strength 75. B Stealth 67B Miniature Tornado 23B Golden Halo 13B Doom Bolt 7B Lightfoot 12B Windrider 12B Rigorous 11B Shadow Veil 11B Wild Heart 10A- Flight 5. Equipment, 3x C ring of storage C fiery boots C fiery helm V scale armor. My panel looked vastly different from a few days ago, and something I hadn't focused on caught my eye. Without my knowledge, my strength attribute had already exceeded the common standard of rank A. The core S dropping from rank A dungeons could bring your attributes all the way to 300. Because I always kept a few skills that added attributes active, I gained a bonus that most people have temporarily and made it permanent. Because of this, my vitality attribute already neared the 300 cap and strength already passed it with 310 even before I absorbed any rank A core S. Just the thought of this was thrilling, as I was already catching up to the rank A hunters, even if I barely had any rank A skills and items. The disappointment of not gaining any rank A skills from the first day of rushing through the dungeon lifted as I felt the increased force and strength of my body. I transferred out of the dungeon for the third time today while not hidden, and received a standing ovation from soldiers that had begun gathering the moment I cleared it alone and came out 2 hours later. It was a big deal to the army as these were things only those standing as rank A hunters could attempt, and they had just effectively sided with such a person. Vice Admiral Magner came out from the throngs of soldiers and looked at me with a hard-to-read expression and then said, "I underestimated you, I apologize." I laughed off the Vice Admiral's apology and pulled out the extra scale armor and fanged sword, along with one of the rank B skill books I didn't use that dropped in the dungeon. I was unlucky enough to receive loot that didn't fit me at all in these 3 dungeon runs. I kept the lie going and was planning on selling these to the military, or better yet exchange them for skills that I wanted from their inventory. The Vice Admiral looked at the items and skill with a thankful expression before his face turned dark. "I'm thankful that you came to our city and are already contributing to the cause as much as you can, but it seems we might have just brought trouble to you." I was surprised at the Vice Admiral's words and asked what happened. He looked at me briefly before sighing and continuing. "A death match has been issued and confirmed between you and Hunter Andrei Nikolov. Tomorrow is the set date for the match." What? This was a complete surprise, as this was something I had never thought to find myself associated with. Death matches were set up between high-ranked hunters that had irreconcilable differences. The Empire didn't want it to be a habit for its peak hunters to kill one another, so death matches were instituted if 2 hunters found themselves at a point where the only way to solve their issues was to fight. The matter was to be taken seriously though, so before the match could be issued both the hunters had to agree to put their lives on the line. Only then would the match be confirmed. So why the hell was a match involving me that I had no idea about confirmed? Seeing my angry expression, the Vice Admiral seemed to have confirmed something. "I heard what happened at the Colosseum today, the issue seems to have arisen from there." Andrei, the son of the blessed Empire's Admiral Chekhov, was next in line to be receiving the rank A skill that Lightning Hand was transferring. Things quickly began clicking after hearing all of this. I was still irked and asked, "So because he's the son of an admiral, he can target someone else entirely, call for a match, and just get to bypass the rules of death matches?" The general looked down with an apologetic tone as he continued, "They cannot touch Lightning Hand for his actions unless they want to cause a fight between the peak powers of the Empire, so targeting you was the easiest thing for them. This is why I have to apologize to you, me bringing you to Star City indirectly put you in the middle of this." I thought about this new situation and then asked, "So what happens if I attend that deathmatch tomorrow and the other guy ends up dead?" I was fairly confident in my strength and didn't plan on losing to someone who should have yet to be rank A. What I was worried about were the repercussions from it. There was a difficult expression on the Vice Admiral's face as he said nothing. I looked at this and at the soldiers around me that were listening in and saw the anger and resignation on their faces. To them, I was a strong hunter that just began clearing mangrove swamp by himself multiple times a day. This meant there would be more resources flowing into their department. Yet, this hunter was now about to be taken away. Nobody had to say what would happen if the son of the Admiral of the Empire were to be killed in broad daylight, even if it was in an arena match. None of them saw a way for me to come out of this. The Vice Admiral's voice rang out again. "I've made multiple calls to friends and higher-ups, but nothing worked. Admiral Chekhov has many people among the higher-ups and his pull is strong. The match cannot be rescinded. The one who doesn't show up will also be blacklisted." I nodded at this and laughed to ease the tension. "Haha, there's no need for all that gloominess. We still don't know who will still be alive tomorrow. Tell me about this Andrei Nikolov." Minus. Attributes: Vitality 250 plus 30 from Life Essence, plus 10 from Military Tactics equals 290. Strength 250, plus 50 from Giant Strength, plus 10 from military tactics equals 250 plus 50 plus 10 equals 310. Chapter 33, An Approaching Disaster. The Vice Admiral dispersed the gathering of soldiers and took me back to his office to continue discussing the matter. Andrei Nikolov was the son of one of the Empire's admirals. He was following his father's footsteps and neared rank A in power, having 2 rank A skills and needing just one more to be qualified and listed as rank A. So the ticket he was expecting to receive to become one of the peak powers of the world was given to someone else, and now he was using his connections to get it back. I had no qualms fighting and even taking the guy out, as this would even mean I get to receive one of his rank A skills when he goes down, but I couldn't stop thinking of the consequences thereafter. I looked to the frowning general that seemed to be using every last brain cell to think and asked what are the possible fallouts in the case that Andrei Nikolov dies tomorrow. His head shot up as he heard this question from me and said the full rage of Admiral Chekhov, who has thousands of soldiers under him, and he himself is a rank A hunter. I listened to this and asked again, as we need to be conserving our strength and increase our battle power with the threat of beasts coming down on us. The strength of rank A hunters is important and there cannot be a confrontation between them. I nodded my head as I heard this and replied with a smile, then it isn't a problem. As long as I have power rivaling rank A, I can take care of anything that comes my way. I looked to the Vice Admiral in front of me as his eyes glowed when he heard this. He seemed to think before replying, if that's the case, then there's another call I can make that can handle the fallout happening tomorrow. With the discussion being over, I left the office holding a folder that held more information on Andrei Nikolov as I made my way to the living quarters. There was only food for me to enjoy this time around, as I had to focus on understanding the skills I just gained today and prepare for something momentous tomorrow. I wasn't fearful of what would happen when the son of an admiral died. This thought passed in my mind, making me realize just how far I had grown in such a short span of time. Admirals were at the top of the food chain in the Empire, and now I was in a position where I could be facing one sometime soon. I was eating the exemplary food on the table as I ran simulations in my head for the battle to come. Because of keeping skills that drained a huge amount of energy but gave a great momentary boost in power active all the time, my attributes already met those in the A rank category. That wasn't to mention all the skills that increased my overall defense, speed, casting and attack speed, evasion, and overall damage by huge percentages. These skills layered on top of active defense skills like Arcanist Sphere of Protection and the recently acquired Golden Halo made me realize just how strong I currently was. Even though nothing was tested, I doubt a single rank B could get through my defenses, and maybe I would be injured from the attacks of a rank A hunter. The classification of having 3 rank A skills before being coined a genuine rank A hunter was to satisfy the high pedestal that rank signified. Only those that were truly strong could be considered in that rank, and having the versatility of using 3 rank A skills affirmed that. Possible plans continued forming in my head as to how this whole thing would end, and soon I felt confident enough to face whatever came at me these next few days. I wouldn't sacrifice my sleep because of it though, and wrapped myself up in the silk bed sheets and fell asleep. In the skies above the Empire, a dashing woman with golden hair was comfortably lying on top of a huge flying beast. She held a bewitching smile on her face as words dripping with honey left her lips. Little Magyar is redeeming his one favor for a rising hunter. Just who could you be to catch the eyes of one of the few sane men in the Empire? She was a veteran rank A hunter that was just below the renowned Steel Mikhail. Her flowing golden hair and the huge beast she flew on would cause mischief anywhere she went. She was now heading to Star City. Morning of the next day. News had spread all over Star City of a main event death match that would be occurring in the Coliseum during the day. The 2 hunters participating each held rank A skills, making them on the cusp of breaking through to the exclusive position of a rank A hunter. The one coming out of it alive would most likely be the newly born rank A hunter to appear in Star City. The excitement was palpitating as all the seats had already been reserved and taken in a few hours, packing the Coliseum to its limits. Those who couldn't watch were left with turning on their TVs and watching the commentators describe the 2 figures that would be fighting as the main event. One was a known hunter in the Empire, the son of one of its admirals and a peak hunter that was bound to be given the rank A title in no time, Andrei Nikolov. The other was a rising rookie with an empty track record, becoming known just recently by winning a free-for-all match against other rank B hunters, Noah Osmont. New information came in that this character is able to dive and complete rank B dungeons alone, but this news was not yet verified. There were a few friends watching the live feed of the packed arena and listening to the commentators when one spoke with a bored expression. Why are you guys even looking at this match as something exciting? This is obviously just another show of power from those assholes at the top, bullying that rising hunter to get what they want. Friend number 1. Hey. You didn't get to see the free-for-all match yesterday. That new guy blew away the golden tank and the flaming witch as if it was nothing. Friend number 2. Haha, no way, a random nobody will even touch a hair on Andre. We're just gonna watch another bloody fight today. I just hope he lasts long enough and the match isn't cut short. Friend number 3. The bored friend listened to this as he shook his head despondently while thinking, nothing has changed at all since the advent of the apocalypse. The fight was set to be happening in a few hours. Figures were alerted around the empire of this impending match. Some didn't care, others were angry at the loss of a potential rank a hunter that would be happening for no reason. Others were just carefully waiting to see what new waves would be made from this fight. Chapter 34, A Show of Strength. Morning of the next day, Vice Admiral Magner had put up an entire regiment together to escort me to the Colosseum. It wasn't as much for protection as a show of support as we rode from the military sector towards the grandiose amphitheater. I was touched with the support Magner was showing, whether it was purely coming from him as a person or because he knew I would give back to them even more after this ordeal was past. The streets were busier than usual, and military trucks rolling through them didn't help it. We arrived at the Colosseum that seemed to be impossibly even louder than the day before, with people screaming to get in and hunters almost becoming overwhelmed. Most of the members of the regiment were stationed outside while me, a few key figures and Magner went through another door to an expansive room that overlooked the arena below. There was a fight going on currently where 2 rank C hunters were working as a team against a rank B opponent, the fight going fairly well with the use of their teamwork. Drinks and food were quickly brought in as many of the people packing the arena today were waiting for the preliminary matches to finish and for the main event to begin. Magner and I were discussing the hunter I was going to face today in detail. From the known information, he held 2 rank A skills. One of them was a defensive skill that made him nearly impenetrable to damage when it was activated, but only lasted for a minute and he had to wait for 10 more before initiating the skill again. The other was a rank A skill that there wasn't a lot of knowledge on, but it was known to be an area of attack skill with a high mana cost that dealt significant damage. Even after knowing these things, I wasn't too worried. I will definitely be careful and watch what he does, but I was that confident in the multiple skills I was layering on myself and the fact that my attributes most likely surpass his because of some of my skills. The only thing I was remotely worried about was the casting of the rank A skill, as none of these skills are a joke. With my percentage boosted defenses and skills, I was predicting the most the rank A offensive skill would do is injure me. I would have the regeneration skill ready to cast in case I took damage from the skill head on. The hour was quickly approaching as the crowd cheered when one match ended and another began as we enjoyed the food in the reserved space. Magner continued to have a worried look on his face as he seemed to be looking to the sky every now and then as if waiting for something. The cheers of the crowd reached its peak when an announcer's voice rang out in the Colosseum. People of Star City, are you ready for the biggest match of your lives? The announcer's voice was drowned out as soon as his word finished as the crowd screamed. Yeah. The announcer continued with a calmer tone. Then without further ado, I give you the contestants of this death match. Andrei Nikolov and Noah Osmont. The cheers continued as a burly man jumped down from another location in the Colosseum. The man had a cold expression on his face. His body was wrapped with a purple robe and he held a frozen staff with his right hand. This was Andrei Nikolov. He was the first hugely built mage I had seen, standing there with an imposing gaze that looked ahead. I rose from my seat and slowly drifted down towards the arena, levitating slightly above 2 meters. From the arena floor as I looked down towards Andrei. His imposing gaze became fierce as he saw this and I laughed while flying towards the podium where the announcer was at. The crowd was already screaming at their peak as they saw this. My voice rang out loud and clear towards the announcer. I just want to confirm something with everyone as witnesses. What is the outcome of a death match? The announcer heard this and fervently replied, his voice ringing out through the Colosseum once more. The match ends in death. With death, the feud is over, and the possessions of the other party are all yours. Yeah. The crowd continued screaming as the announcer said this. I nodded my head and landed on the arena floor, watching the enraged mage standing opposite to me who couldn't wait to rip my face off. Match, start. The fight began with cheers as Andre moved first, pointing his staff towards me and casting a skill that formed 5 spinning dark orbs that flew towards me. I used flight to evade the balls coming after me, my speed being fast enough to watch them as they whizzed by me and smashed onto the high walls, exploding into a mass of darkness. I wanted to test the guy out as I cast my newly gained Doom Bolt. A large streak of red lightning quickly formed and crashed down towards Andre, his expression quickly changing as his body was enveloped with wind elements and he rapidly disappeared from his location. Boom. The lightning bolt was abnormally powerful as it blasted apart the grounds of the arena. This was a rank B skill boosted by many active support skills, its power becoming more terrifying. Andre appeared at another location in the arena, his face turning abnormally serious as he looked towards me. I returned the stare back and said, "Don't get scared now, I'm just getting started." I wanted to enrage this man as much as I could. The angrier he got, the more mistakes he would make, and the easier I can take him down. The main challenge was what would be happening after he fell. His serious face became red as he seemed to have made up his mind. I smiled at this and cast a miniature tornado towards him while also casting Doom Bolt to descend on him once again. He watched these deadly skills coming towards him as his body began shining in a golden light, his skin rapidly adopting a color and sheen similar to a statue. Rank A skill Regal Armament was cast. The golden skin shone in the light as the Doom Bolt struck down and the sharp winds of miniature tornado neared. Cheers rang out in the arena as these iridescent colors appeared on the arena floor. Boom. Another loud explosion resounded in the arena, and when the dust cleared, a golden man was still standing there, matchless. I looked at this and prepared all my attention. If he has already cast his defensive skill that only lasts a minute, he should then be planning to let out the deadliest attacks in this 1 minute. I didn't seem to be wrong as his staff began glowing hazy white, and the danger sense that hasn't activated in a while dimly began ringing. Chapter 35, A Show of Strength 2. Andre looked at the confident face of the man in front of him as a swirling mass of winds were coming and another red lightning bolt was crushing down. He wanted this man who had taken something that should have been his to die as quickly as possible, but his power seemed to be greater than anticipated. He wouldn't back down though, as his father was watching this fight. He had to prove to himself and to his father that he deserved the title of rank A. He deserved to join those standing at the peak. He just needed to take the skill back from this man. The rage inside him calmed a bit when he thought back to the lessons from his past and acted, casting Regal Armament right away. The skill struck him, and he only felt a stinging pain on his skin as they disappeared. This was the power of rank A skills, something no normal hunter would be able to get their hands on. Andre came out unharmed and moved quickly before the timer of the skill ran out. He barely had half of his mana remaining, which might be enough to cast the next rank A skill that would obliterate the confident hunter in front of him into nothing once or twice. He raised his staff, and frigid impermanence was aimed towards the area with the hunter at its center. Boom. An explosion of ice erupted out from the location where Noah was, utterly destroying 1/4 of the arena floor and sending nearby spectators screaming from the impact and shock waves thereafter. This was the terror of rank A skills, their damage was unmatched. Andre breathed heavily as he looked at the epicenter of the explosion where the hunter was nowhere to be seen. Had he done it? Had he finally grabbed the chance to reach the peak? He looked for the hunter's body before he sensed danger and looked up, seeing the man floating in the air. There was some blood gushing out from his right thigh that was rapidly closing up at high speed. Seeing the man was still alive, Andre moved to cast the rank A skill one last time before Noah recollected his wits. He only had a few seconds remaining with Regal Armament, and already felt another 2 red lightning bolts smash into his skin seconds after he saw Noah floating in the air. Just how many of these can you cast? Boom. 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 Andre was trying to get the position of the man that was rapidly moving in the air as more lightning bolts crashed down on him, not giving him a moment of rest as the stinging pain gradually became unbearable. Feeling that he had only a few seconds left before the skill's time ran out, he cast Wind Escape once more, moving his body to another location where he got the chance to aim at Noah again and cast the skill once more using all his remaining mana. Frigid Impermanence. Boom. Another resounding explosion filled with ice elements rang out, causing the screams of those who were near and the cheers of those that were far. The blast this time occurred in the air, sending shock waves that damaged the eardrums of hundreds of people in the audience. Andre rapidly moved his eyes while roughly breathing and holding onto his staff as support. Was he finally dead? Despair slowly filled his face as he saw the same man back down in the arena floor. His armor tattered, and it seemed like he received minor cuts that were already healing. Ow. Ow. I'm sure the skill hit you head on. He was rapidly thinking about what to do now that all his energy reserves were gone and the golden skin he had on was rapidly fading. He looked to the man with the same confident face that was now flying towards him as he finally became scared for his life and unwillingly looked towards a certain area in the audience stands. Otter. His voice rang out loud and clear, as if it was his last resort. A booming voice then rang out that drowned the cheers of the audience. Spare him. The voice was calm, and yet resounded in the ears of every single person in the Colosseum. A red streak of lightning had already formed and was heading down towards Andre when it stopped. He breathed out a sigh of relief as he saw Noah come to a stop and look towards where his father was. He sighed in relief and disappointment at not being able to take this hunter down, but at least his father was here to make sure he won't lose his life. He wanted to get up and go, but still felt the bolt of lightning not too far from him still hanging in the air. The voice from the stands rang out again. The match is over. A heavily built man with a low fade had risen up from the stadium, staring down at Noah, who was holding his hand in the air, as if that was the only thing keeping the red lightning from striking down. Andre regained his calm as he saw the figure of his dad coming out and rose up. He would be. What? A deep sense of dread and fear arose in him as he felt his scalp tingling and then began burning. The red streak of lightning had struck down. Boom. Silence. There was a shock to all the people that were watching the match, whether it be in the arena or those watching at home. Because they knew the figure of the man that had risen up. That was Admiral Chekhov. Why was he in Star City? What just happened? The hunter Noah finished the death match, but what made him so bold to defy the words of an admiral? What would happen now? The silence remained as the body of Vice Admiral Magyar began shining and he began to move. Noah looked towards the location where a pile of burnt flesh lay and flew in, reaching for the glowing skill book that appeared and the staff that was in the hands of the dead Andrei Nikolov. A bubbling power was rising in the stands that made people begin to scream and rush out of their seats for the exit. Those watching at home were shocked at the turn of events and appearance of an admiral that should not be in Star City. He was normally stationed in the capital of the empire, and rarely came back to visit his hometown. The powerhouses that were coincidentally watching quickly began making calls to people that were near the city. A catastrophe was about to break out. Vice Admiral Magyar was still looking towards the clear sky as he looked for something that wasn't yet there and shook his head, preparing to see if talking would work. He wasn't able to get near the arena before a pain scream rang out as mad power exploded from the stands. You beast! Chapter 36, Collision. Vice Admiral Magyar watched the next events unfold in shocking fashion as Admiral Chekhov seemed to have forgotten everything around him as he erupted with power that launched him towards Noah as if he was a missile. The body of Admiral Chekhov was leaking purple light as his fist reached Noah, the impact smashing him down into the arena floor. The more surprising thing was seeing Noah fly out a second after, his equipment tattered but his body seeming perfectly fine. The purple light surrounding the Admiral formed into a purple disc that he stood in the air with. Feeling the strength of that blow and the power emanating in the field, Magyar stopped going forward as he knew he would only lose his life if he came by. He only had rank B strength after all. What he didn't understand was how much he had underestimated Noah. How was he able to stand against the strikes of multiple rank A skills and still be able to stand against an A ranker? The surprises this man kept bringing out were too numerous. But if he had already reached this level, it was a great thing for the future of the Empire. This fight had to be stopped. He was about to look at the masses of people scrambling to get away from the Colosseum when Chekhov moved once again, this time the purple light forming into a spiked fist that rushed toward Noah. Vice Admiral Magyar looked at this as he wished the person he called to get here as soon as possible. Whiz. The huge spiked purple fist rushed through the air with a grating sound as 3 red lightning bolts smashed into it, dissipating its form. Noah didn't seem to be done as 3 more rapidly rotating tornadoes rushed where the Admiral was. Chekhov looked at the incoming mini tornadoes and waved his hand, a purple blade forming which split the rotating winds apart as if they were paper. The field calmed down. After this trading of attacks, Chekhov was still bubbling with anger and grief but was gradually calming down. More purple swords were forming beside him as he spoke. Yes, he was in the wrong, but he didn't deserve death. His rage seemed to have been reignited as he finished his words and the purple swords around him began to vibrate. Noah watched and then pulled out the new skill book he had obtained before the purple fist came crashing down on him. The glistening book was on his hand for only a second, before he brought it near his body and it was dissolved in colorful lights that went inside. Admiral Chekhov looked at this happening and became even angrier, screaming out while commanding his large vibrating swords to rush forward. If you had shown your level of power, none of this would have happened. My son would not have called for a death match. We would have simply waited another week for the next skill book and moved on. This is your fault. His rage was palpitating as his purple sword neared Noah's position. Boom. A resounding explosion rang out after, the purple swords being destroyed by the explosion, leaving behind a wide area where ice elements were still fluctuating. Frigid impermanence was cast once again, but this time from the hands of someone else. Magyar looked at this sight with incredulousness, questioning the mana reserves of the man that kept on throwing spells left and right. Calmness seemed to have returned on Admiral Chekhov's face as his mind seemed to be made up, numerous purple spiked fists and sword beginning to appear around him. At this time though, a sultry voice rang out in the destroyed Colosseum. Haha, Chekhov, you're actually planning on going all out in the middle of a city. Unknown to everyone, a huge black eagle that was boasting more than 5 meters in size was suspended in the sky. A woman with flowing golden hair sat atop this eagle. Magyar soon felt elated at this person's arrival that signified the end to the mess today. He saw Admiral Chekhov's expression change to that of annoyance in the midst of anger and pain as he spoke. Why are you here? The woman laughed mischievously as her eagle neared the floating Noah in the sky. She looked at this foreign hunter before speaking. Now where has someone like you been hiding all this time? The woman atop the eagle pulled her eyes from Noah and observed the destroyed arena while continuing. Now with a stern tone, I came to resolve any issues from the peak powerhouses of the Empire that should not be fighting amongst themselves during this time of crisis. Chekhov didn't seem to mind as the woman ignored him and he looked towards the man that stood calmly in the air. He knew that he would not be getting anything resolved. The man before him had risen to a position no lower than him, and seemed like he was only getting started. The thing that caused him even more pain was the utter stupidity of the entire affair. None of the things that occurred were necessary. If only his son had just swallowed his anger and waited. If only he knew about the person he set up a match with. If only. He was a smart man and knew not to go down the path of destruction. There were many more people depending on him. This conflict will end here. The damage done now was already too much and he didn't want it to continue further. He gave a tired sigh as the purple disc below his legs moved towards the destroyed arena. He tenderly looked at the remains of his son and bent down to pick up what remained, and quietly flew away. I observed the woman in the air with great interest as she stood on the menacing black eagle. I had recognized that huge eagle from clips I had seen in the past. My heart was still pounding from the battles that had just finished. While watching the sad figure of Admiral Chekhov move away, I wasn't remotely sorry for the death of Andrei. He came after me, knowing full well the death match would result in death. He was okay with this. His people were okay with this, and those that cleared and issued the deathmatch were okay with this. They just got wrong which person would be dying. The thrill of withstanding the destructive damage of frigid impermanence, unstable and destructive ice elements erupt in a specified 5-meter area and then gaining the skill myself was hard to describe. The fact that this skill dropped and not the one that turned his body golden meant it was at a higher level than the usual rank of skills. Back then, I was even skeptical of being able to withstand the power of the admiral that had decided to come to the city to watch his son. Did he really think I would stop in the middle of the match just because he said so? If it was me from a few days back who still held a few rank C skills, maybe I would have stood down. But I knew my power would near if not rival a rank A with all the boosts I was receiving from skills and had also received many rank B skills that emboldened me to make the gamble of obtaining another rank A skill by taking out Andrei, and it worked. The Admiral's attacks were ferocious and damaged the scale armor, and after bypassing Arcanist's sphere of protection and golden halo, they could barely just leave cuts and bruises on my body, similar to the devastating damage of frigid impermanence. I was curious about the skill that allowed the Admiral to form those spiked fists and swords, but that would have to wait as I watched the woman turn her attention to me. She spoke in that melodious voice of hers that demanded attention. I'll be the first to congratulate the newest rank A hunter of the blessed empire, Mr. Noah Osmont. I'm known as Elizabeth, but you can call me Liz. I tried not to get taken in by her cadence as I smiled and said, "Thanks for stepping in. I wasn't sure I could hold on any longer." Her figure shook as she let out another laugh and said, "Really? You seemed inexhaustible, like you could go on for an entire day. I shook my head at these words and looked at the coming vice admiral that was shouting directions to members of the regiment to help those who were injured and calm the chaos around the arena. "Oh, you have little Magyar to thank for my appearance here today. He called in a favor from long ago and used it for you," she said as she watched him come over. I looked towards Magyar. I was actually very thankful for the continued help from this vice admiral, and was planning on doing my best to bolster his forces in the coming days. I flew down as the huge eagle also descended to meet the vice admiral that was looking towards us with a delighted expression. Chapter 37, Calmness. Magyar was happy that he had gained someone with rank of battle power as his ally, and couldn't hide it as he talked to me and the rank a hunter with the huge beast that had stepped in to end the fight. If the fight had continued, I was pretty confident of coming out on top, but it would have taken quite some time. I could keep on casting my newly gained rank a skill until the admiral was tired out, but the chance was gone. I also wasn't planning on going around and making it a habit taking down famous hunters everywhere I go. I knew there was a grudge between me and the admiral now, but I wouldn't go out of my way to kill him for it. He was a peak powerhouse of the empire, and would be needed for the battles of the future with these unknown enemies. Unless I could become strong enough to be able to do everything by myself, I won't go around snuffing out others with similar power to me. If he ever comes for me again. Though, that is a whole different matter. The rank a hunter Elizabeth left after we spoke for a few minutes, saying she now had to go deal with other matters that popped up because of this, and that she would come by when she was free. My gaze lingered on her slightly as she flew away on the Black Eagle. It was now nearing the evening, and more soldiers and hunter medics were on the scene helping those that were injured from the aftermath of the battle. I wasn't sure when the Colosseum would be open for business after this. After giving out orders and leaving someone else in charge, I left with Magyar in tow back to the military sector. I was planning on spending the remaining hours of the day diving in Mangrove Swamp, feeling more pressed to clear the dungeon and luckily obtain other rank skills. Going to the highest ranked dungeon at the Empire's capital, Blessed City, wasn't an option as a team of rankers led by Steel Mikhail was clearing it. Unless I rapidly increased my power to be able to rival multiple rank A hunters, I wouldn't touch that dungeon alone as of now. Farming rank B dungeons for the possibility of a rank A skill dropping was the safest and most efficient way, as I would also pay back Magyar by giving him the items and skills I wouldn't need while grabbing some from their inventory. This was also what some of the rank A hunters spent their day doing, clearing rank B dungeons repeatedly in the Empire's capital and other core defense cities. Every now and then a rank A skill would drop, and this was the case for the flight skill that Lightning Hand was holding on to. Why he did what he did by giving it away still eluded me, but I would find out in time now that my power was matching his. Whether it was with malicious intent or out of the goodness of his heart didn't matter now that it allowed me to get another one so fast with the rapid progression of events. The events these past few days played in my head as I asked myself if there was actually a conspiracy, or just unintended effects from one man's actions. The Vice Admiral went to handle communications for the incident today and I went into Mangrove Swamp once again. My speed at clearing the dungeon had increased even more with the advent of frigid impermanence as it cleared droves of alligators the moment it was cast. This area of effect skill exploded with a destructive blast of ice elements that completely destroyed anything in their range. Something that was noteworthy of mentioning was the adept staff that I took from Andre, as it slightly boosted the damage of skills when it was equipped. After using frigid impermanence for a while, my mind was filled with ideas on how to improve its damage even more after I recalled some rank B skill books I had seen in the military inventory that I read through before. The idea floating in my mind was to find support skills that were providing boosts specific to the skill type to further increase the damage. An example was a lightning penetration skill I had seen before that amplified damage dealt by lightning type skills. If I could absorb and keep active cold type support skills, it wouldn't be too far of a dream for the frigid impermanence skill's power to exceed rank A. As for the rank beyond A, well, nobody knew of this as of right now. I was able to clear the dungeon rapidly, making the number of times I've dived into it 18 times in the last 6 hours. It was nearing midnight, so I was planning on calling it a night. The rate at which I was clearing the dungeon was still kept hidden as I only turned off Shadow Veil, Stealth, and Camouflage after every hour, making it seem as if I had cleared the dungeon only 6 times. This was still an unbelievable clear rate that every time I visibly transferred in and out, the soldiers standing guard would cheer. I gained a variety of skill S, item S, and a ton of core S, but I wasn't lucky enough to get anything of higher rank from the dungeon. The useful skills I could learn reduced, as many were either weapon-specific for knights or berserkers. Some support skills like Giant Strength and Windrider had even dropped again, giving me duplicate skills that I couldn't absorb. Only 2 usable rank B support skills came out of these 18 runs, one being Emboldened Ferocity, an imposing presence emanates from you, granting increased damage to affected foes, and Eagle Eyes focus your eyes to view as far a mile around you. The remaining were rank B items that fully upgraded me from the lower ranked items I had been wearing. Noah Osmont occupation, Hunter. Vitality, 250 plus 40. Focus, minus. Strength, 250 plus 60. Skill S, FED Flames of Torment 100D Safeguard 57D Danger Sense 100D Rough Skin 100D Fleeting 100C Arcanist Sphere of Protection 100C Camouflage 100C Aura of Haste 100C Explosive Rune 100C Life Essence 100C Increased Penetration 100C Regeneration 100C Whirlwind 95C Smite 98C Gracefulness 100C Precision 100C Adamant 100C Sharpen 100C Warcry 100C Retaliation 100C King's Rage 100C Military Tactics 100C Unpredictable 100C Elemental Damage 100B Giant Strength 88. B Stealth 77B Miniature Tornado 45B Golden Halo 33B Doom Bolt 37B Lightfoot 23B Windrider 23B Rigorous 22B Shadow Veil 22B Wild Heart 21B Emboldened Ferocity 3B Eagle Eyes 3A- Flight 11A- Frigid Impermanence 5. Equipment 3XC Ring of Storage B Scale Armor B Adept Staff B Dual Coated Boots B Striking Cap. The addition of items besides the staff was a helm that was in the form of a baseball cap and heavy boots that shone a dark green color. Both provided increased defenses and protection. I carried the rest of the Core S, Item S and Skill Book S in my storage rings and went to the Vice Admiral's castle. I thought about everything he had done for me before deciding to trust him a little bit more about my strength. When the door of the office was locked and it was just me and him, I took out more than 20 things that were filling up the space in my rings along with a glistening pile of stones. These were a collection of items, cores, and skills from today's dives and yesterday's. The Vice Admiral looked at the items in shock as he gave me a questioning look. I clear the dungeon much faster than what I am currently showing. I continue to want to keep the extent of my strength a secret though, so I will be counting on your discretion as we go forward. This is also my way of thanking you and giving back for what you've been doing for me recently. Magyar looked at me with an unreadable expression before he got up and bowed his head towards me. I reached out to stop him as he began talking. You are somebody that has already surpassed someone of my rank. Thank you for treating me the same way. Even now he kept his head down as he continued. Just the resources you have taken out right now surpass what our department usually gets in a week. This may not seem like much to you, but it is a tremendous help to us and will enable us to raise multiple rank B hunters. Confidentiality is a must, so you can be sure that nothing about this will come to light, and everything will be distributed discreetly. I listened to the older man that was bowing in front of me before I pulled him up. I smiled and said to the Vice Admiral, "We're all in this together. We'll face the approaching enemies together and make sure lives are not senselessly lost like when all of this began." I was saying this more to myself as I was reminded of the deaths of my parents and many more people at the hands of these beasts. I reminded myself once more that I was doing all this to never experience the feeling of cowardice and powerlessness again. If continuing to grow my strength was the way to do that, then I will continue rising until I reach an unshakable position. Magyar gave me a light smile as his sight turned to the many things I had taken out, shaking his head in an amazed expression as he laughed and said, "It's been a tiring day for you. Go ahead and relax. I'll order for even more food and other delicacies for you to enjoy back in your quarters." I shook my head with a smile as I heard this and said, "I'll also need your help acquiring specific skills that may still be in your inventory." I let him know of the skills I saw before that I wanted to grab now, and also told him to keep a lookout for any other cold-type support skills that other hunters brought in. He nodded boisterously that he would have everything for me tomorrow morning and for me to go take a break for now. I left the Vice Admiral's office and went to relax after a very long day. Chapter 38, Irreversible Changes. The night was a hazy blur and passed by in a blink. I woke up the next morning feeling invigorated as I saw the sight in front of me while feeling the colors and boosts of multiple activated skills that seemed to fill my body with inexhaustible power. If I didn't have Stealth and Shadow Veil activated at all times, people would just see a mass of colors and defensive layers surrounding me at all times. I freshened up and left the living quarters to start this day early, planning to be holed up in the mangrove swamp for the remainder of the day to see exactly how many times I could clear it before a rank skill would show itself. I flew through the clear skies and arrived at the huge monolith, which seemed to have turned to a shade of light blue after I cleared it so many times. That day, I spent my entire time diving and I was able to clear the dungeon more than 40 times. 40. That number did not seem realistic, and something like this had never occurred in the past. Nobody had the unending stamina to do what I did repeatedly for an entire day. One good thing came out of it, as I was finally able to receive a rank as skill from this dungeon. My next rank as skill was Guardian Light, a light that cures injuries, ailments, and diseases. Descends down. It wasn't a defensive or movement skill that I was thinking about, but it was an amazing skill nonetheless. Its usefulness would be even more apparent whenever the time comes where I get injured again. Also, besides my original 3 rank C ring of storage, I was able to get an additional drop of these rare rings, this one even being rank B and holding a much larger space that was now holding a ton of item S, core S, and skill book S from the past 40 dungeon runs. I was leaving the dungeon for the last time today to sift through the useful skill books and those that I would be giving away. Most of the items that dropped were duplicates of scale armor or the other items that dropped in this dungeon before. I placed my hand on the green crystal and transferred to the outside world once more. I nodded to the guards and was about to head towards the Vice Admiral's office when I felt the ground start shaking. The tremors were emanating behind me and I turned back to see the huge dungeon monolith that was now a light fade of blue. Had cracks spreading out from the middle. Oh shit. The cracks expanded as the tremors got even stronger, and the huge monolith began trembling before an explosion ran out. Boom. A huge blast was sent out as I was flung away and any hunter soldiers that were near were heavily injured. I had watched the huge monolith of the mangrove swamp expand with cracks and then implode. When the dust cleared, there was an empty space where the monolith used to be, only a small shimmering crystal lying at the center. I looked at this with my mouth wide open. What the hell did I do now? I was trying to calm my emotions as I went forward to observe the shimmering crystal that remained from the monolith when I was suddenly met with a searing headache. Ah! I screamed out loud as I clutched my head and felt this pain that threatened to make my head explode. In my agony, a few faint words rose up in my mind that I could barely make out. Move. Faster. Minus. An hour after. Tumultuous waves were spreading throughout the empire. News had just been transmitted to all the leaders and governments of various cities of an incident where a dungeon had completely disappeared. This was the first ever change to occur since they first began appearing. New dungeons could appear at any time, but there was never a case of them ever disappearing unless a dungeon break occurred. The more shocking news that was coming out was that a hunter was involved in causing this. Leaders from all over were scrambling to find the authenticity of these news. If any of this was true, if any of this could be replicated, higher-ups who understood the current world were trembling in anticipation for the possible future. Minus. In a grand palace at the center of Blessed City, there was a large hall lined with guards wearing golden armors. At the forefront was a striking throne that shone with a purple light. A person was sitting on this throne looking at the admirals kneeling down below the steps. A feminine voice rang out in the large hall. I want a thorough report about all the events surrounding that dungeon. By the end of the day, I expect to be briefed with all the information about that hunter as well. The voice paused after this was heard before continuing. Treat the hunter very carefully, he might just be what we have been waiting for. On the throne was a figure fully covered from head to toe. A royal mask was hiding the face and an exquisitely defined crown lay atop their head. Minus. A man whose body was crackling with lightning was just transferring out of a rank B dungeon when his phone began blowing up. He pulled the phone out in annoyance as he read to see just who would dare to bother him so much. There were multiple texts and missed calls from people he didn't want to talk to all, but the things he was reading were giving him a shock. Get back to base soon, Admiral X. What is your connection to the rising hunter of Star City? Admiral XX. Call me back. Now. Admiral XXX. Nothing he was reading from the texts was making sense. A name kept popping up that he didn't recognize, Noah Osmont. He was busy clearing dungeons and didn't even get the news of the deathmatch he inadvertently caused this same day. After reading some more and seeing a lot of the questions were revolving about the event a few days ago where he handed the winner of an impromptu match a rank a skill, the name and person came together. The lightning was sparking out in an unstable manner the more he read on about what had just occurred. He was in shock as he thought my impulsiveness actually led to something good. Minus. An incident had occurred that caused shock waves to spread not just throughout the empire, but to the many allied countries in the United Federation. The news leaked out the moment it began spreading, other countries soon learning of this momentous affair. Delegates were assembled and tensions rose. The excitement was palpitating. Everyone could feel it. A change was coming. Chapter 39, What Are You? I was looking at a glowing crystal after finishing the talk with an excited vice admiral over what had just occurred. After the implosion of the dungeon monolith, there were many hunter soldiers that were badly injured, and I was able to see the versatility of my recently learned skill, Guardian's Light. When I directed this skill to the injured soldiers, whether it was a light scratch or deep wounds, they all began to heal in a few seconds before becoming as good as new. A few guards that were near death were also stabilized and brought back to health in a few seconds. The next hour after that was the most tiring time I had gone through these past few days. The first point was the only thing that was left behind as the dungeon disappeared. Information about its name was the only thing I could observe, everything else was unreadable. Plain crystal --_ and plus. Email protected at plus at %. A plain crystal. What are you and how can you be used? I had tried putting in energy, crushing it, absorbing it, nothing had changed. Something even more pressing along with this was the episode where I had an excruciating headache, and whether I was hallucinating or not, I clearly saw the words move faster. I gave some thought to these new developments as I realized I might be in the middle of something much greater than what I knew. When I spent the hour discussing with Vice Admiral Magyar about everything that had occurred, this was the only thing on my mind. I told Magyar I needed some time to think, and here I was staring at this crystal while thinking about those words. Among the many possible hypotheses I had, one of the more likely ones was that there was a correlation between what I have become able to do, the blank focus, and now all of that was somehow weaved into whatever sent me that message while my head was splitting apart the moment I caused a dungeon to disappear. When the cracks spread throughout, it wasn't the normal dungeon break where monsters broke out, the entire monolith was just completely gone. My mind had already ascertained that it was around 40 times I had cleared the dungeon before the light blue color became thinner and thinner, eventually exploding after. This meant as long as dungeons were cleared a specific number of times under a very short duration, there was a possibility of breaking them. I knew something like this was huge, as it would put me in the middle of this taking a leading role for the time to come. Nobody could clear dungeons as many times as me without tiring out. Unless many hunters formed tens of teams to target one dungeon, they wouldn't be able to match my rate. I was questioning why lower-ranked dungeons had not disappeared like this before, and came to the conclusion that different ranks of dungeons would require to be cleared a different number of times rapidly before the monolith would implode. There were 3 rank B dungeons in Star City, and they were being cleared maybe 3 or 4 times a day by teams of hunters. Lower-ranked dungeons in core defense cities like this one would be cleared in faster rates, with rank C being approximately 10 to 20 times, rank D 30 plus times, rank E 40 plus, and rank F more than 50 times each day as there were more and more hunters each level down. These numbers were only normal for core defense cities, and would be even lower for the cities in the outer perimeter of the Empire that had very few dungeons. An example was how Outer Bank X City only had its rank C dungeon cleared once every few days. But none of these lower-ranked dungeons had disappeared, meaning they required to be cleared even more times in a day before a case similar to Mangrove Swamp could repeat itself. This was only a theory and had to be tested. I had cleared this rank B dungeon so rapidly that it could not keep standing. Many questions came after that which made my head buzz. I took a deep breath as I stopped thinking for a bit. I would understand everything in time. What I needed to focus on now was simply what the words in my head said. Move faster. I already thought my rapid progress was monstrous, but I had to move at a much faster rate. I was planning how to start testing some of my thoughts when a light knock was heard. Sigh, didn't I tell them not to bother me for now? I stayed quiet and kept on thinking, but I soon heard the door clicking open and footsteps coming inside. You all really couldn't wait. I was about to berate the figure that was intruding in my living quarters but was stunned when I saw who it was. A sweet voice rang out mischievously as a woman wearing a red dress with a head full of golden hair came in. You really are full of surprises, aren't you? Elizabeth was trotting in like she owned the place, which might not be too far off as whatever access she had allowed her to enter my room with no problems. I looked at her calmly and replied. I don't even know what happened myself. These words weren't completely false, as there was a lot I didn't know. The hunter that seemed to be in her late 20s or early 30s smiled and looked around the room as she said, "I would love to get a better idea about what happened. May I accompany you for a discussion tonight?" I looked at the woman whose every word she spoke seemed to have multiple meanings. I looked at the tight red dress she was wearing and the head full of golden hair. I continued to be alert so that I wouldn't be taken in by her pace and smiled. "Sure. I'll bite." Minus. Magyar was not able to get a wink of sleep the entire night. He had spent a majority of it deflecting powerhouses from getting near a certain man and being grilled with questions. He wasn't fully successful though, as someone had still slid through. He thought of a certain hunter as he shook his head and thought about all the collection of hunters that were staying in his base. He had been excited just like everyone else at the new development and was waiting to see how things would play out from here. Dungeons could be permanently erased. This was naturally good news, but it prompted another question that he didn't want to think about. Should they all be permanently erased? Should only some be erased and a manageable few left behind? Magyar was thinking of all the resources that came out of dungeons as these ideas clashed in his mind. Things got even more hectic as people from Blessed City appeared, making him feel like he was walking on eggshells. He tried putting all of this aside as he neared the quarters of a now famous man and knocked. A moment passed before the door opened and a half-dressed man looked out. His upper body seemed packed with muscles, as the abdominal muscles were so pronounced that it almost seemed they were fake. In the room, slender long legs of someone could be made out. Dr.ap.ed over the bed. Magyar looked at this and gave a smile, choosing his next words carefully. "Sir, we'll be holding a forum with representatives from major cities to discuss the new developments and how to move forward from here." He couldn't bring himself to talk to the man the same way he had been doing before. He was doing too many inconceivable things. The man seemed to shake his head before he spoke. "I'll be out in a moment." Chapter 40. How to Destroy a Dungeon. I was standing at the front of a room where a long oval table was situated, with many new faces sitting and expectantly waiting. Nobody in the room spoke when I walked in, and even now more people were taking their seats in a hushed manner. The Vice Admiral led me to a chair to the front of the room and stood behind me. I could see some familiar faces in the crowd that I recognized, one of them being the man that inadvertently propelled the sequence of actions these past few days, Lightning Hand. When he met my gaze, he gave me that same boisterous smile and laughed. The moment it seemed like everyone was there, buzzing voices rang out as the discussions began. The whole process took an entire hour and was filled with many boring arguments and discussions, but the core things to take out were the same. Much of the discussion revolved around the repeatability of erasing a dungeon and whether we should be actively erasing them at all. Sparks began to fly when these comments arose, as for some it was common sense to destroy the dungeons that could release monsters anytime if they weren't regularly cleared. I didn't speak fully about my power, but people could make inferences about it after knowing the process that was required to completely destroy the rank B dungeon. I recalled the words that were urging me to move faster before I rose up from my seat, quieting the many voices in the room. I looked around me as I said, "I'll be moving to confirm everything with another rank B dungeon. Once the process is clear, we will know how to proceed from here on out." I wanted to take a more active role in the world around me after seeing everything that was happening. My first step in doing that was to replicate what I did yesterday. There was still an army of monsters approaching from the Barrens, and who knows what else is lurking out there. I didn't know how much time I had before I was thrown into something else, so I was going to move fast. I left the conference room to start acting on my plans as soon as everything wrapped up. Elizabeth was already up and moving, making it clear she wanted to come along. Having this rank a hunter with me would not be a bad idea, as it would provide another cover for how expansive my strength that allowed me to clear a rank B dungeon more than 40 times in a day was. The next target was one of the 2 remaining rank B dungeons in Star City. Lion's Den. Magyar and other officials moved to watch the development outside the monolith as we dived. Lightning Hand and other rank A hunters that had arrived in Star City were going to test the same thing by forming multiple teams to clear the 3rd dungeon in the city, Bullish Arena. Multiple rank A hunters formed more than 10 teams that were filled with rank Bs in the city, and the groups moved in on the dungeons. The ones heading to Lion's Den would be me, Elizabeth, and a few other teams, while the rest would go towards Bullish Arena. The goal was to meet the number of times I cleared the now extinct mangrove swamp and see if it was applicable to the rest of rank B dungeons. After this was understood, the tests would be expanded for the other ranks of dungeons. I was able to see the power of another rank a hunter firsthand as Liz summoned the humongous eagle. The moment we were transferred into Lion's Den, the eagle had flawlessly shining dark feathers that were as sharp as knives and piercing claws that brought fear onto the monsters that began appearing. We were located in a bleak grassland environment where multiple large lions were circling us. The eagle's imposing air was holding some of them back as the woman atop the eagle laughed in that alluring tone and commanded the eagle to move forward, its outspread wings acting as sharp blades that decimated everything in sight. I wasn't going to be left behind as my figure flew to the other groups of lions that were soon blasted away with an even stronger frigid impermanence that was now boosted by 2 new cold-specific support skills I obtained from the military inventory. Greater cold penetration. Ignore the enemies. Resistance as cold skills deal increased damage, and cold fire. Cold type skills attach freezing flames onto the enemy, made the already damaging skill even more destructive as any beast in its range of attack would be turned into meat and bones, with the cold spreading into the surroundings and attaching onto nearby beasts. Blue flames could be seen spreading to any beasts that were in the blast area as they screamed out painfully before their bodies were frozen cold. Lion's Den was an expansive space of shrubs and grassland with dens on lions here and there. We had to fly around for more than 30 minutes blasting away hordes of lions before we were faced with the impossibly large titan that had a glorious lion's mane flowing in the wind. Liz looked at me as her lips twisted up in a mischievous smile and said, "He's all yours, let's see how fast you can take it down." She seemed to be enjoying herself as she gave me a thumbs up while lying on her stomach atop the flying eagle to watch the show. I looked at this figure as I recalled memories from last night before I quickly shook myself out of it and focused on the matter at hand. The lion instinctively felt the danger when I neared and moved back, barely evading the epicenter of the casted frigid impermanence as the freezing flames in the periphery jumped on its body. It stopped to let out a roar of pain, but it would be the last time. The huge jaws opened as another frigid impermanence bloomed explosively from its head, cutting short the roar and blasting chunks of meat and brain matter into the ground. I ignored the cheerful sounds of clapping behind me as I picked up the core and item that dropped from the boss. We repeated this dungeon multiple times until a few hours later, on our 28th dungeon run, something occurred. Throughout the runs, Liz had done nothing but summon the huge eagle that did all the work in dismembering the monsters that I began looking favorably to getting a powerful summoning skill of my own in the future so I could just sit back and watch someone else do the work for me. Her eagle would have been out of commission after the first few dungeon runs as its body was littered with injuries. If it wasn't for me casting Guardian's Light after every dive thereafter, the huge eagle would have had to be desummoned and summoned again to be back in top shape. That summoning process took more than half of all energy reserves Elizabeth had, so she would usually dive into rank B dungeons a few times a day before calling it quits. She stopped being surprised at my constant casting of spells after the first few dungeon runs as her cheerful expression became more complicated. I wasn't too worried at showing some level of my power as I was confident in myself to withstand many of the things that could come at me, and I had to stop hiding if I wanted to move further into the future. The change that was occurring currently on our 28th dungeon run was our surroundings literally cracking as if they were glass. The lions in the den in front of us were disappearing as if they were dust as a green light spread out to cover the eagle and us as we disappeared from the dungeon halfway through. We were transferred to the outside world where we could see the imposing monolith with cracks all over. Anyone that was remotely close to the monolith moved back as many people got the chance to witness the destruction of another dungeon for the first time in history. It looks like the other teams were doing well enough to clear the dungeon more than 12 times after my team was on our 28th run. The team that finished the dungeon for the 40th time was the trigger that caused the instability where any remaining teams in the dungeon were ejected out and the eventual destruction we just witnessed. This was working proof that the theory was correct. Dungeons could be destroyed. I listened to the triumphant sounds around me as I turned my head to the woman beside me. We were both standing on top of her black eagle as the monolith exploded. I was surprised to find tears dropping from her crystal clear eyes as she watched the sight. She turned to me and talked in a serious expression for the first time since I met her. "You didn't expect to see me cry so soon." She was wiping away the tears that kept on falling as she continued, "I don't know if you understand the full significance of what we are doing, but for many of us, it is liberation." She looked forward at the sight of hunters hugging one another and said, "I have watched countless people die before me as I was forced to keep on going into these dungeons day in and day out. I felt like I would go crazy if I had to keep on doing this for the years to come. The only way I could cope without breaking down was to put on a happy face and keep on going. She looked back at me as she said the next words. So thank you for making something like this happen. Thank you, and please do not stop. I watched the sight of the sorrowful girl in front of me as she tried to form a smile on her sad face before I let out a sigh and brought her head to my chest, making sure to remove the rough scale armor and place it into one of the storage rings beforehand. I didn't particularly have strong feelings of attachment towards this person as I had only met her for a few days now. Even the one night we spent together, I attributed it to just a fling from the growing interest around me. She was much more alluring than many of the women I had come across recently, but I always felt like she was putting up a face, so I kept my emotions out of it. Her words repeated in my head as she sobbed. Liberation. I already made up my mind long ago for what I was doing. There were too many things I didn't know, and much more that I didn't understand. Even without her reminder, I would not be stopping anytime soon.